Hello and welcome back to my channel, What If Deku 2.0. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off part 2 of our series, What If Deku Was in Class B and Had Harem? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is Alpha of Rapture from Fanfiction.net. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. UA Main Building Class 1B. The entirety of Class 1B sat in their classroom chatting with one another as they awaited Vlad King's arrival. The classroom door opened at the exact moment the bell rang. All the students went quiet as Vlad entered the classroom with a stack of papers. "Good morning, everyone," spoke Vlad as he took his normal position behind the podium. "Good morning, Vlad-sensei," responded the students in unison. "I went over the recordings from your battle trails, and I must say you all did better than I expected, but some of you still made errors or took advantage of the fact that it was a training exercise," spoke Vlad as he hands out the papers he had brought with him. "These are the compiled notes that All Might and I made. Go over them, understand your mistakes and what you could have done differently," continued Vlad as he returned to his podium. "Yes, sensei," responded the class as some students skimmed through the papers they were given. Others noticed that some had thicker packets than others. "Now there are a few things I'd like to announce. Next Monday will be your first class for rescue training. We'll be going to one of the facilities on campus. But given the distance, we have to get there via bus. That Friday your parents will be invited on campus to tour the facilities, meet the faculty, and watch you all in a training exercise that will show off what you've learned so far. After which you'll all get a week off to prepare for the sports festival," spoke Vlad, a raised hand making him pause. "Are our parents going to get tickets for the sports festival?" asked Hanuki, wanting to know if his parents and siblings will get to go to the festival in person. "Yes, they will. At the back of those packets are forms for your parents to fill out. It lets us know how many are coming to Parents' Day and how many seats for the sports festival we need to reserve for them. Even if they don't come for Parents' Day, they can still go to the festival if they fill out the forms," answered Vlad. Hanuki nodded in understanding. "Lastly, you are going to be electing your class representative and deputy class representative. Each of you will get 1 vote each. The 2 with the most vote get the positions. Take this seriously. Remember, these 2 will be in charge for the rest of the year," spoke Vlad as he handed out slips of paper. Vlad expected the voting to last longer than it actually did. He quickly discovered the reason as he counted the votes. A good chunk of the class had simply voted for themselves. Once finished, Vlad brought the winners up to the front of the classroom. "So with 6 votes your class representative is Midoriya, and with 5 votes your class's deputy representative is Kendo," announced Vlad, gesturing to the 2 students that were now standing at the front of the class. Izuku was obviously unsure and nervous at being chosen for the position, while Kendo tried to keep a neutral face, but it was clear she was concerned about Midoriya. "Who the hell voted for the rabbit? Why would anyone vote for him?" thought Kirawaro, agitated that Midoriya had won the position. "Yeah, you won, Izuku," spoke Pony in English as she happily pumping her fist in the air. "Cutie," thought Izuku, his nervousness momentarily forgotten by Pony's adorable display of support. "Congrats, class rep," commented Kami as she plays with some of her hair. "Whatever, as long as he doesn't screw up too bad, I don't care," spoke Kamakiri, resting his chin on his hand. "Come on, he'll do fine. He clearly has skill if the battle trail is anything to go by," spoke Hanuki, pointing out Midoriya's achievement from the day before. "Why, you'll both do great," encouraged Komori so quietly that the only reason Kendo and Izuku heard her is because she was seated in the front row. "I agree. United they will be quite the effective team. Conducting their assigned duties should prove a simple task," spoke Yanagi, fully believing in the pair. "Indeed, Sir Midoriya and Miss Kendo will work well together," added Jiroda, nodding in agreement. The bell rang, signaling that homeroom had ended and the next class, Modern Hero Art, would begin shortly. "All right, you're free to go. Izuku and Kendo, you two still have to appoint a class secretary and a treasurer. Please tell me your choice before the end of class tomorrow at the latest," spoke Vlad to the two students. The students all stood, collected their things, and headed out for the art classroom. But before Izuku could step out of the classroom, "Midoriya, you're to meet me at Gym Gamma after classes are done today. And make sure to wear your gym uniform," barked out Vlad, startling Midoriya. "Yes, Vlad-sensei," responded Izuku. Before he bowed and left, for the rest of the day he would worry about why Vlad wanted to see him after class. Yua cafeteria. Izuku had been distracted most of the day between being voted class representative, trying to figure out one for all, and his meeting with Vlad. Izuku had a lot on his mind. Izuku's absent-minded behavior did not go unnoticed by his friends. Kendo found a table for the group that coincidence let her keep an eye on Bakugo. Once the group was seated, Ryuko decided to speak to Izuku. "Izuku, you seem perturbed. Is this due to your recent appointment as the class's representative?" questioned Ryuko, politely from her position next to Izuku. Her face was emotionless and her tone neutral as normal. Her hands, however, revealed her concern as one of them was gently touching Izuku's arm. Izuku did not blush or grow embarrassed at the contact. Instead, he seemed to relax, calmed by the Inaga's presence. "Yeah, I'm worried about being the class rep. I don't think I'm qualified. It would have been better if someone else was rep," responded Midoriya with a sigh. "You are qualified," spoke Pony, admittedly denying Izuku's words. "We won the battle trail because of you," added Kanoko from her spot across from him. "You'll do a hella good job," commented Kami, giving him a thumbs up. "You are intelligent, strong, and have a willingness to be the first into a fight. Not to mention your determination. You have a lot of traits of a good leader. Those are some of the reasons I voted for you," spoke Kendo as she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You were one of the 6 to vote for me," spoke Izuku, looking at Kendo. "I also vote for you," spoke Yanagi quietly. "Me too. You already thinking about ways for us to improve," added Setsuna, referencing his notebook. His other friends confirmed they also voted for him. "We chose you to lead the class. I get that you're scared of messing up. But I know you can do this. They know you can do this. Plus, you're not going to do it alone. I'll be right there to help you. So please keep the position," spoke Kendo, trying to reassure and convince Izuku. "Okay, I'll do it. Thank you all of you for putting your faith in me. I won't let you down," spoke Izuku, a large smile spreading across his face. That smile must be protected, thought some of those who had witnessed the sheer warmth of Izuku's smile. "You're welcome. By the way, why does Vlad want to see why?" started Kendo before she was cut off. Siren. Warning, level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. "Hey, what does a level 3 security breach mean?" asked Setsuna after she grabbed one of the upperclassmen that were running by. "It means that someone got past the school's barrier. This is the first time that this has happened since I've been here," explained the third-year student before he ran toward the exit. Izuku and his friends were almost immediately separated as a wave of students all tried to get to the exit, all of them pushing and shoving as they panicked. Izuku and Kanoko ended up shoved into one of the windows. Izuku braced himself against the windowsill and placed himself between Kanoko and the other students. Kanoko was facing out the window. "Are you Oka-oaf?" started Izuku, but he was interrupted when another person was suddenly pressed into Izuku's back. "Hey guys, I didn't think this would be how we got closer," spoke Setsuna, despite her joke. She was, in fact, hiding a large blush on her face. Izuku lost focus when he felt the distinct feeling of a pair of soft masses pressing into him. Due to this, Izuku stopped bracing himself, which with the crowd's continued shoving forced the 3 teens to press into each other. Kanoko was pressed up against the window and Izuku was sandwiched between the 2 girls, his crotch pressed against Kanoko's ass. now being a healthy young man who is currently going through his hormone-filled puberty. Izuku's body decided to react accordingly. In other words, it decided to do the most awkward thing possible that it could do at that moment, despite Izuku using every trick he could think of to prevent it from happening. It took Kanoko a few moments to process the position she was in, and it took longer for her to realize exactly what was pressing into her. This situation, understandable, caused the two shy teens to turn bright red. In an effort to distract herself, Kanoko looked outside and spotted the cause of the panic. She looked over her shoulder, meeting Izuku's eyes. Izuku, it's the media, they broke through the front gate," informed Kanoko, her face still flush. Her words snapped Izuku out of his embarrassment. It only took a moment for him to come up with a solution. "Setsuna, detach your head," spoke Izuku. Setsuna did want was asked and floated her now detached head into Izuku's field of vision. "What do you need, Prez?" asked Setsuna as she resisted the urge to make a dirty comment about their position. "I need you to find Kendo. Tell her it's just the media, there's no danger. Tell her to clap using her quirk to get everyone's attention so she can calm them down," spoke Izuku, explaining his instructions. "All right, I'm on it," spoke Setsuna as her head floated up above the crowd to find the Kendo. Not even 2 minutes after, something akin to a thunderclap reverberated through the hall. Everyone went quiet and the students stopped shoving and pushing. "Listen up, everything's okay, it's just the media outside, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. Now please exit the building in an orderly fashion," yelled Kendo. Her words calming the crowd started to carefully and calmly exit the hall. As the students filtered out, Izuku was able to back away from Kanoko. Thankfully, Izuku's uniform hid his erection. Kanoko was relieved that the situation was over, but a small part of herself missed the feeling of Izuku pressing against her, his big. Kanoko mentally slapped herself, preventing her mind from continuing on its train of thought. She glanced at Izuku with a massive blush on her face. "Thank you for the help, Setsuna," spoke Izuku with gratitude and a bow. Setsuna's head reconnected with the rest of her body. "No problem. By the way, how did you like the twins?" spoke Setsuna, whispering the last part into his ear. Midoriya quickly deduced what she was talking about, reminded of the position he was in moments ago. Izuku went beet red. Setsuna cackled loudly as the three made their way out of the cafe to meet up with the rest of their class. UA Gym Gamma. The situation with the media lasted longer than Izuku expected it to. This was due to the teachers having to patrol the school to ensure no other unauthorized personnel were on campus, after which the day had gone by as normal. Once classes had resumed, Izuku and Kendo had asked for volunteers to fill the class secretary and class treasurer positions. A vote had to be held as a result of the number of students that volunteered. The vote went by quickly and the positions were filled. The class was all set for the first student council meeting tomorrow. After classes finished, Izuku said goodbye to his friends and made his way to Gym Gamma in his gym uniform. Gym Gamma was a simply rectangular build with a concrete floor, reinforced walls, and a high ceiling with large windows that allowed natural light into the building. When Izuku entered the building, he spotted Vlad Sensei over by a screen built into one of the walls. The hero turned to face him as he entered. "Ah, you're here, great. Let's get started," spoke Vlad, pulling out a remote while Izuku approached. Sensei, exactly why did you want to see me?" asked Izuku, a little nervous he had done something wrong. "I brought you to see this," started Vlad as he pushed a button. The screen lit up and started to play video recordings of the entrance exam, the assessment, and the battle trial, more specifically the instances that Izuku used his quirk. "I reviewed the recordings from your entrance exam, your assessment, and your battle trial. I went over the footage with a fine-toothed comb and I noticed something strange, but had to talk to Recover Girl to confirm my suspicions," spoke Vlad as he gestured to the screen. Izuku understood his teacher's unspoken request for him to try and find what he did. Izuku concentrated on the footage of himself trying to decipher what was amiss. But despite Izuku's intelligence and his ability to analyze others, when it came to himself, Izuku struggled to be objective. He watched the footage on repeat, but all he could focus on the negative aspects of whatever he did. His mind flashed with the words of those who had bullied him for most of his life, no voice louder than that of Bakugo, every insult like a dagger stabbing into what little confidence he had. After 15 minutes of silence, Vlad noticed his student mood dropping and decided to intervene. Izuku, All Might mentioned you were analyzing your classmates in a notebook. Could you show me? Requested Vlad, snapping Izuku out of his downward spiraling thoughts. Yes, sir, responded Izuku as he pulled out his notebook and handed it to his teacher. Vlad paused the footage as he opened the notebook. Where did he get that from? He doesn't have his school bag, thought Vlad as he skimmed through the entries of different students and teachers. He was impressed by the detailed notes. He then found the entry on himself with a stretch and several blocks of text. This is scary, accurate, unsettling, so. What's this? Thought Vlad as something particular grabbed his interest. This would be depending on exactly how much control Vlad King has over his blood. But if he has control over not just his red blood cell, but also his plasma, then he could potentially create monomolecular blades using his quirk, which could be useful not just in combat, but also for breaching and rescue operations. Read Vlad, thoroughly flabbergasted that he had never thought of this. I'll have to try this next time I train, thought Vlad. This is very impressive. Being able to analyze others like this shows a sharp mind. A skill like this must be properly sharpened. I'm sure Principal Nezu will be very interested in helping. Proposed Vlad, not knowing the terror he would unleash later in life. Izuku broke out into such a bright, joy-filled smile that Vlad was worried he'd get a tan. I didn't notice any entry on your own quirk. Have you tried to analyze your quirk after it awakened? Asked Vlad as he returned the book to Izuku. No, I haven't, responded Izuku, lowering his head. That's fine, you can start now. I'll give you a hint. Focus on your clothes, spoke Vlad. Izuku looks through the video, straining to find what's strange. It only took a few minutes for Vlad to see realization spread over Izuku's face. In every instance, I used my quirk, my clothes were shredded. But during the entrance exam, my pant legs were fine. It also happened in the battle trail. My gloves got shredded, but not my shoes, exclaims Izuku excitedly. Exactly. I found it strange when I first noticed it, so I talked to Recover Girl. She mentioned that the injuries to your legs were less severe. Now why do you think that is? Spoke Vlad, wanting Izuku to figure it out on his own. Izuku places a hand on his chin and descended into mutters. Is it because I spread out my power? Asked Izuku after coming to a possible explanation. That is the conclusion I came to, spoke Vlad with a nod of affirmation. But how do I spread it over my whole body without hurting myself? Spoke Izuku, asking himself just as much as he was asking Vlad. Tell me, how do you normally visualize your quirk? Asked Vlad, rubbing his chin. Well, I picture an egg in a microwave and I try not to let it explode, replied Izuku, embarrassed at his silly visual. Vlad resisted the urge to facepalm and instead called on his many years of experience in teaching to come up with a solution. All right, sit down. I want you to close your eyes, began Vlad as he and Izuku sat down, Izuku closing his eyes as instructed. When you draw on your quirk, what does it feel like? Asked Vlad. Izuku took a few moments to reply. It's a tingly feeling like a ball of lightning, but it's also warm like sunlight and it shines like a comet, spoke Izuku, trying to properly articulate how it felt to draw on his quirk. Not what I was expecting from a telekinetic quirk, but I can work with this, thought Vlad. Okay, I want you to picture a power plant around the ball of lighting that sits in your chest, continued Vlad. After several minutes, Izuku nodded when he had done it. Now picture light bulbs that are spread throughout your body and are all connected directly to the power plant. Do you see it? Spoke Vlad. Yes, I do, sensei, responded Izuku. Great. Now, instead of sending power to just a few bulbs causing them to blow out, I want you to distribute power to all the bulbs evenly. Take as long as you need. spoke Vlad, finishing his instructions. Vlad watched for the next half an hour as Izuku concentrated. Eventually, Vlad started to see green lightning arcing off parts of Izuku's body. Vlad had to resist speaking as he did not want to break Izuku's concentration. For the next hour, the arcs fluctuate in intensity and location. Izuku grunted in discomfort and pain a few times, but eventually, the arcs of electricity spread covering Izuku's entire body and appeared at a consistent rate. I think I got it, but I think this is only about 5% of my quirk, spoke Izuku, frustrated and down because that was all he could handle. That's a good starting point. Now I want you to hold on to that feeling, memorize how to draw out your quirk. Once you have a firm grasp on it, I want you to open your eyes and try moving, instructed Vlad, reassuring his student. After a few minutes, Izuku opened his eyes and started taking slow, deliberate steps. He started going faster and faster until Izuku was sprinting. He tried leaping and easily cleared several meters in his single bound. Izuku laughed loudly in joy at his success. Vlad smiled as he watched his student revel in his achievement. Well done, Izuku, but we're not done yet. We have to make sure you can fight like this, spoke Vlad as he moved to the center of the gym and shifted into a fighting stance. Izuku took a moment before he closed the distance and started throwing out a flurry of punches and kicks. Vlad easily blocked Izuku's attacks using a pair of small bucklers made of his blood. His form is sloppy, not surprising given he's never been properly trained in a fighting style. His strikes have decent power behind them, I can feel them through my blood shields. But it seems he focuses more on punches. A more kick-oriented style would work better with his physique and build, mused Vlad as he finished observing Midoriya and threw a light punch at Izuku which connected to Izuku's gut. The unexpected blow caused Izuku to stumble, and he lost his focus on maintaining his quirk. Activate your... What do you plan to call this technique? Asked Vlad. Izuku only took a moment before responding. I was thinking of calling it full cowl, spoke Izuku. Well, reactivate your full cowl and let's go again, spoke Vlad as he slipped back into his fighting stance. The two trained for hours. Izuku threw attack after attack, and he did break through Vlad's guard a few times and landed some solid blows. But most of the time he was being thrown around the gym. He was still having trouble maintaining his full cowl, often losing his hold on it when hit. But each time Izuku got back up it took more hits for him to lose full cowl. Their last exchange left Izuku on the ground flat on his back trying to catch his breath. Alright, that's enough for today, Midoriya. We'll keep doing this training after school until I think you've got a good handle on this full cowl technique of yours. We'll also see if you can control the lighting you generate, spoke Vlad as he helped Izuku stand up. Thank you very much for helping me, sensei, spoke Izuku appreciatively. Vlad laughs heartily as he slaps Izuku's back, nearly knocking him over. It's no big deal. I wasn't going to say stop breaking your bones without putting my all into helping you. I'd be a pretty bad teacher if I did that, spoke Vlad, clearly thinking that leaving a student to continue to hurt themselves and leaving them to figure out a solution on their own was negligent, irresponsible, and unprofessional. In class 1, a dorm's erasure sneezes himself awake. Before you go, I've got 2 assignments for you. First, from now on, when you get to the dorms, I want you to keep full cowl activated for as long as you can, even if it's just at 1%. Be sure to record your progress. Second, I want you to look into the pro heroes in Genium and Mirko. Their fighting styles should work well with your quirk and body type, spoke Vlad as the two left the gym and Vlad locked the door behind them. Sensei, is it all right if we keep this a secret for now? I don't want the others knowing until I can properly use full cowl, spoke Izuku, explaining his request. Sure, Midoriya, we can keep this between us for now. Remember that you still have rescue training in 6 days and you could properly test this technique there, replied Vlad, understanding Izuku's shy disposition. Thank you, Sensei, and I understand, spoke Izuku with a bow. Before he could leave, Vlad grabbed his shoulder. Midoriya, I just wanted to say, I'm proud of your progress today and you should be too. Keep it up and you'll have complete control over your quirk before you know it," praised Vlad, wanting to help build his students' confidence. "Thank you," responded Izuku quietly, barely able to contain his emotions. Izuku gave Vlad a deep bow and left toward the dorms. "Full cowl is the first step in mastering one for all, which means I'm one step closer to being a hero. I need to work even harder so I don't disappoint those who have faith in me," thought Izuku, feeling this was a turning point in his journey. Class 1B dorms. It was the middle of the night within the dorms of Class 1B. Izuku tossed and turned in his bed. His sleep is clearly fitful. He would occasionally mumble out a word or phrase. It was dark in his dream. Izuku stood in pitch blackness, or was he laying down? It was hard to tell. All he could see was a ball of rainbow light shining in the distance like a star. He was unable to move his body or speak no matter how much he tried. "Toshi? Got lucky, this one," spoke a woman's voice from outside Izuku's vision. Her words abruptly cut in and out like a video call with a bad connection. "Toshi? Is she talking about All Might?" thought Izuku. Agreed his quirk. A great boon to one. But I wonder why got my quirk first. "Yours makes sense," spoke a male voice in a prim and proper tone. Izuku strained himself trying to hear more of the conversion. "What? Is he talking about one for all?" thought Izuku, who was confused at what he was hearing, or if he was missing context due to only hearing fragments of the conversion. "Well, you, the most excited to see him. Full cowl," spoke a different male voice in a teasing tone. He spoke in what Izuku knew was fluent Italian. "To be expected from. He loves seeing people grow," commented a second female voice, also in a teasing tone. She sounded slightly younger than the other women. She also had an accent that was similar to Rin's accent, so Izuku deduced that she was most likely Chinese. "It strange this isn't how normally interacts with the users. Normally, just quirk," spoke the man with the proper tone. "True, but this is not normal quirk. First, what you think will happen," spoke a new male voice that Izuku could only describe as super funky for some reason. "Hard say, guess, gain of quirks," spoke another male, his voice hoarse and raw. "If that's case, I'd like get mine next," spoke the woman he had first heard. "But how long till unlocks next one?" questioned the Chinese women. "Depends how fast he two for all," replied the Italian man. "I'm curious about is what happens starts affecting your quirk first," spoke a new male voice that didn't sound too much older than Izuku. "That is something. Have to wait and see it. Be interesting. Wake up," spoke the hoarse voice to Izuku as a shadowed face with red eyes suddenly popped into Izuku's vision. "Ah!" yelled Izuku as he sat up panting heavily, a hand over his heart and a cold sweat visible on his face. "Wake up, Naya. It's a new day. We are stunningly cute and cat-like. Wild, wild pussycats are here to wish you good morning. So wake up, little kitten," blared Izuku's alarm clock, signaling the start of Izuku's day. Whipping his brow, Izuku got out of bed and began preparing for his day. What was with that dream? It was a bunch of voices, right? But what were they talking about? It's all kind of fuzzy, thought Izuku as he tried to remember the dream. But the details were slipping away, so he took a moment to write down what he could recall and planned on thinking about it after he finishes training with Vlad after school. UA main building. The school day had gone by without incident. Several of the entrance exam training bots guarded US front gate as it was still destroyed from yesterday's incident with the media. But Izuku had a hard time believing that any of the news reporters had done it. Lunch had been eventful as Bakugo ended up swearing at some other blonde kid that had a smug expression on his face. Thankfully, a girl with a frog quirk knocked out the smug blonde using her tongue before the situation escalated. Ida then admonished Bakugo for his behavior. Izuku felt a little happy at seeing Bakugo being reprimanded. After classes finished, Izuku and 1B's other class officers made their way to the meeting room. Every first-year class was represented. Principal Nezu himself sat at the head of the long table and the hero course representatives on either side of him. Greetings and salutations everyone. Today's meeting will be short. As you all may know, the UA Sports Festival is taking place at the end of the month. Traditionally, the business course students are allowed to run stalls and sell products during the festival. However, they must fill out forms declaring what they plan on doing. All of you are going to review these proposals and approve or deny them based on a set of criteria we will discuss later. For right now, I'd like to do introductions. Class 1A, could you please begin? Spoke Nezu, gesturing to the Class 1A reps. Hello, I am Momo Yayurazu and I am Class 1A's representative. Spoke Momo eloquently. Hello, I am Tenya Ida and I am Class 1A's deputy representative. Together we will maintain and elevate U.S. prestige, spoke Ida intensely, his arms moving around in strange robotic patterns. It reminded Izuku of how Yanagi moves her hands around when she talks. Hi, I'm Ochako Uraraka and I'm Class A's treasurer. Let's get along, spoke Uraraka in a very bubbly, airheaded way. Hey, I'm Kyoka Gyro. I'm Class A's secretary. Spoke Gyro in an aloof manner as she played with one of her earlobe jacks. Izuku, as normal, went to pull out his notebook so he could make an entry about Kyoka's quirk. But Kendo used one of her hands to prevent him from getting his notebook out. She guessed that if he did start to analyze Gyro, he'd descend into intense muttering. Hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya. I'm Class B's class representative. Spoke Izuku with a slight stutter after realizing he was next. Hello, I'm Itsuka Kendo, Class B's deputy representative. Spoke Kendo confidently. Yo, I'm Class B's treasurer, name's Setsuna Takage. Nice ta meetcha. Spoke Setsuna with a toothy grin and a peace sign. Hi, I'm Pony Tsunatori. I'm secretary of 1B. Sorry if I say wrong things, still learning Japanese. Spoke Pony in a timid demeanor, nervous at having all the other class officers looking at her. Her actions reminded Izuku that he should offer her help with her Japanese when they finished the meeting. I'm Chikuchi Tojike, the class rep for the General Studies course. Let's work well together. Spoke Tojike curtly, her tone flat and a slight glare sent toward the hero course students. Sai, I'm Hitoshi Shinso. I'm the deputy rep for the general course. Spoke Shinso, his tone reinforcing his exhausted looks. The introductions continued in a similar manner. True to Nezu's word, the actual topic of the meeting was completed very quickly. Only 15 minutes after the introductions, the meeting was over and the class officers were released. Most of the students thanked the principal for his time and left. Mr. Midoriya, Vlad King has spoken to me about you wanting to train your analysis skills. I'm excited to assist you. Please come to my office on Saturday afternoon around 2 o'clock. Spoke Principal Nezu in a polite, cheery manner as he sipped from a teacup. Really, thank you very much, spoke Izuku appreciatively, giving the principal a deep bow. No problem, it's been quite a long time since I directly taught a student. Now run along, your friends are waiting. Oh, and I'd like you to bring all the analysis notebooks you have. Replied Nezu, shooing Izuku out the door. What was that about Izuku? Asked Pony in English, her head tilted to one side. Vlad-sensei thought that Principal Nezu could improve my ability to analyze. Explained Izuku, making sure not to speak too fast so Pony could follow. That's good. You'll be even better at strategizing than before. Once Nezu is done teaching you, you'll be scaring the piss out of even the nastiest villains. Spoke Setsuna, her head literally hovering over his shoulder. Oh, Kendo, I wanted to ask you if you had some free time this weekend? Asked Izuku innocently. The girls all froze at his words. Pony looked shocked and Kendo blushed a deep crimson. Wow, I didn't think you were so bold, Izuku. Commented Setsuna, however, something was off about her voice. Izuku suddenly realized what they were thinking and blushed a deep red. That's not what I meant. I just wanted to ask if you could teach me a little bit about martial arts, explained Izuku, quickly waving his hands in the negative. It's all right, I understand. I'll have to ask permission from my folks. But how does Saturday around 10 a.m. sound? I'll give you my address after I get permission," proposed Kendo as she recovered her composure. "That's fine with me. Thank you, Kendo," spoke Izuku with a smile that made Kendo's heart skip a beat. "By the way, Pony, would you like me to help you with your Japanese later?" asked Izuku, wanting to assist the first friend he made at UA. "I'd love that. Thank you, Izu," yelled out Pony as she pulled Izuku into a hug, her head fitting snugly in his chest as she nuzzled him, mindful that her horns did not hit Izuku. Izuku, although embarrassed at her action, hugged the girl back, slightly confused as to why his offer made her so excited and happy, not realizing that she was happy because she wanted alone time with him. Later that day, Pony's room. Pony was feeling conflicted at the current situation. She felt happy that Yanagi, Setsuna, and Kami showed up to help her study Japanese. But she had wanted some alone time with Izuku and was understandably frustrated. She at least got to sit next to Izuku for most of the study session. Her classmates spent several hours helping her, and she had to admit that it was a big help. Kami was helpful in explaining certain concepts that don't really make sense for a Westerner, and Izuku proved himself to be a patient and effective teacher. Yanagi helped her on how to talk politely and respectfully, while Setsuna showed her how to understand slang, some double means, and subtle insults. She was by no means anywhere near fluent. It will take a lot more time and effort to learn, but she'll likely make fewer mistakes in the future. The teens were all seated around a small table, except for Kami, who was sitting at Pony's desk chair. "All right, it's been fun, but I'm gonna head out," spoke Setsuna as she stretched her arms above her head, purposely allowing her pajama top to rise up, showing off her stomach. She smirked as she saw how Izuku was looking away with a blush on his face. She stood and moved for the door. "Good night and sweet dreams, ahaha," spoke Setsuna as one of her disembodied hands ran along Izuku's jawline and then booped his nose. His reaction caused Setsuna to laugh as she left. "I'm a bounce too. I promised the fam I'd give him a ring today. See ya tomorrow," added Kami as she slinked out of the room with a slight wave. "Well, it's still a little early for bed, but maybe I can," stated Izuku as he started to stand, Yanagi mirroring him, both clearly thinking of leaving. "Wait, do you two want to watch some anime with me?" asked Pony, eagerly waiting for a response. Izuku paused, not sure how to answer. He glanced at Yanagi, who also seemed to be waiting for his response. "For sure, it sounds like fun," spoke Izuku as he sat with his back against the pony's bed. Yanagi moved to sit on his left. Pony happily jumped to her feet and turned on a projector, connected it to her computer, and started one of her favorite anime. Once the theme song started, she eagerly sat down on Izuku's right. The trio watched the pre-quirk anime about a group of pirates in search of adventure and treasure. The three heroes made comments and talked about the show. Izuku was intrigued about the crew's chief, who only fought using kicks. Pony seemed to love the crew's captain, an excitable rubber man with a straw hat, and Ryuko seemed to like the crew's navigator, a raven-haired woman of few words that could make hands paper anywhere. Things sure have changed, thought Izuku, properly realizing his situation. He was attending U.S. Hero course, he was the rep for Class 1B, he was All Might's successor, and he had made friends that stuck by him even after Bakugo had threatened them. He was even hanging out with a pair of cute girls and was surprisingly comfortable with the situation. Even when Pony and Yanagi leaned against him as they watched, he didn't feel nervous or embarrassed. He smiled, feeling something far deeper than simple joy. In this quiet moment, he felt truly content. The three teens watched for 2 hours before Izuku's phone went off. He pulled it out to check who it was. Pony stood and paused her computer. "Sorry, it's my mom. I'll be back in a few minutes. You two can keep watching," explained Izuku as he left the room to go answer his phone. Pony decided to keep the show paused and wait for him to return. She sat in her spot again and looked over at Yanagi. "Thanks for helping me with my Japanese. I really appreciate it, Yanagi-chan," spoke Pony, using some of the polite language Yanagi had taught her earlier. You are most welcome. However, please feel free to use my first name. We are friends, are we not? Spoke Yanagi in her normal tone, her face not changing from its neutral expression. Of course we're friends, Ryuko-chan, replied Pony happily, giving the quiet girl a quick hug. Pony? Do you perhaps like Izuku in the romantic sense? Asked Ryuko bluntly as she looked at Pony. Pony was so surprised at the question that her horse-like ears popped out from her hair and a blush grew on her face. Well, yeah, I do like him a lot. I know it's a bit weird since it hasn't been long since school started. But there's just something about him. I know I should probably focus more on becoming a hero. Is it wrong that I want to be close with him at the same time? Spoke Pony slowly as she didn't want to mess up. Pony was poking her fingers together nervously the whole time she spoke. Ryuko stared at Pony for a few moments to make sure she was finished before she responded. No, it is not wrong. I am also very fond of Izuku and wish to be closer to him. Spoke Ryuko in her normal flat tone, despite the fact that a blush dusted her cheeks and her hands were freaking out. Pony stared slack-jawed at her gray-haired classmate. Before Pony could respond, the door to her room opened. I am back. What did I miss? Asked Izuku re-entering the room. We paused it so you would not miss anything, responded Ryuko as she used her quirk to restart the show. Izuku sat back in between them, but he felt this weird tension in the air. The three continued to watch for another 2 hours, after which Izuku left with a polite good night. Once the door clicked shut, and she was sure Izuku had properly left, Pony turned to Ryuko, who hadn't moved from her spot. Ryuko's face remained ever stoic, but she was wringing her hands nervously. Ryuko-chan, I think we need to talk, spoke Pony, doing her best to be assertive. Saturete Kendo Family Dojo. Izuku glanced at his phone's GPS before turning left as it indicated. He was currently making his way to Kendo's house. He was walking through parts of Musutafu that he had only rarely been to before. The week had been one filled with hard work for Izuku. The UA classes themselves proved to be not as difficult as expected, for him at least. His lack of a proper social life for most of his life led to studying being his biggest time sink, followed by his hero notebooks and video games. The only class that gave him trouble was art, mainly due to Midnight's and Satsuna's near-constant teasing. Thanks to Vlad Sensei's extra training, he could maintain full cowl even after getting hit several times. He could also push himself to 8%. But he could only hold it for so long as it strains his body to the point that he can cause hairline fractures in his bones. Speaking of his training, he had discovered over the week that he could seemingly hold full cowl at 5% as long as he was conscious. He theorized this was because 5% didn't put much of a dent in the vast amounts of energy stockpiled within One for All. He wasn't sure how long he could potentially hold 100%. The longest length of time All Might had ever done hero work was after a devastating earthquake where he was active for 48 hours straight. But he could talk to All Might about that later. He needed to focus on his training. He had training with Vlad basically all day tomorrow. He was really looking forward to working on his leg. You have reached your destination, spoke the robotic voice of his phone, interrupting Izuku's thoughts. Izuku looked at the large Japanese-style building in front of him. A wall surrounded the building, and an ornate gate with large wooden doors lay open before him. A sign hanging above the gate marking the building as the Kendo Family Dojo. Izuku made his way to the front door. But before he could even knock, the door slid open, revealing a large man in jeans and a polo shirt. The man stood head and shoulders taller than Izuku. His hair was cut short and was a deep brown in color. The man sized up Izuku for a moment before speaking. The dojo's not open today. If you want to sign up, come back on Monday with a parent, spoke the man in a flat but polite manner. He started to slide the door closed. Wait, I'm here to see Kendo-chan. She was going to help me today, explained Izuku before the door was closed all the way. The door slid back open rapidly, and the man took a few steps toward Izuku and loomed over the hero in training. And what exactly do you plan on doing with my daughter? Spoke Kendo's father in an intimidating fashion. Izuku's nervousness tripled, which only made the father's eyes narrow at him. Before Izuku could respond to the question, an enlarged hand smacked the man upside the head. The man bent over and rubbed the back of his head. Quit scaring him. He's only here so Itsuka can help him with his hand-to-hand. Spoke a woman stepping out of the doorway. She looked like an older, more mature version of his classmate. She wasn't much taller than her daughter and wore her long orange hair in a single long braid that was laid over her shoulder. She wore a shirt and pants that revealed her athletic physique. "You must be Midoriya, right? Itsuka told me you'd be come over," asked her voice and demeanor exuding a motherly feeling. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing me over," responded Izuku politely with a bow. "No problem. It's always nice to have one of Itsuka's friends over. Are you going to be staying for lunch?" asked with a smile as she shrunk her hand back to normal. "Thank you for the offer, but I can't. Principal Nezu wanted to help train me later today," explained Izuku. The woman placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a smile. "That's fine, maybe another time. Itsuka's in the training room. It's the big double door down the hall and to the left, can't miss it," spoke, ushering the boy into the building. Izuku immediately followed the directions to the training room. "You can't keep trying to scare off every boy that enters our home," spoke quietly once Izuku was moving down the hall and out of earshot. "I just want to test the boy that Itsuka's been talking about since school started. He looked ready to bolt before you stopped me. He honestly doesn't seem like much to me. Did Itsuka ever mention what his quirk is?" Spoke in a slightly amused tone as he gestured toward Izuku, whose baggy clothing made him look scrawny. The adults were oblivious to the strong physique hidden beneath. She didn't give details. She only said it was really strong with a severe backlash. Spoke recounting what her daughter had mentioned. "Honestly, he doesn't seem all that strong. The kid looks like I could snap him in half by accident." Mused with a laugh. "There are different kinds of strength, you musclehead. Principal Nezu is one of the smartest people on the planet, and I've never heard of him personally training anyone one-on-one. Midoriya's quirk probably increases his intelligence or something. Besides, he came over to improve, to get stronger. That counts, right?" spoke in a teasing tone as she lightly smacked her husband's chest. "I guess you have a point. The kid did make it into the hero course." Spoke with a chuckle, grabbing the hand and giving it an exaggerated kiss. "Of course I do. Now I do believe you promised the boys you'd take them to the park." Spoke, laughing into her other hand while looking at him lovingly. "You're right. I almost forgot. I'll see you later. Love you," replied, rushing down a hall to bring his two sons to the park. The training room was exactly as Izuku had expected, a large square room with a tatami mat floor and a high ceiling. However, one thing that looked very out of place was a set of armor and swords that sat in an alcove. Izuku wasn't sure exactly where it was from, but it looked Western. But Izuku's attention was pulled away from the armor by the sight of Kendo stretching in a tight workout shirt and pants. But it was the fact that her normal ponytail was traded out for a tight braid similar to her mother's that gave him pause. She gave off a different feel than at school. Izuku couldn't quite identify what the feeling was, but he liked it. "Hey Izuku, ready to get started?" asked Kendo, bounding over to him. "Hi, I just need a moment. Thanks again for helping me, Kendo," spoke Izuku as he pulled off the Kamui Woods hoodie and his pants, revealing a black workout shirt and shorts. "I'm always happy to help. We'll warm up real quick, then I'd like to see your form," spoke Kendo, pointing at a training dummy. Izuku mirrored Itsuka through the warm-up stretches and exercises. After they moved to the training dummy, Kendo had Izuku throw a few punches and kicks at the dummy. "Your form is sloppy, but it looks like you understand some of the basics. Get into your combat stance," spoke Kendo. Izuku spread his legs slightly and raised his fists in an unrefined boxing stance. "That won't help you at all in a fight. Nothing against boxing, but it's not the best for fighting villains. You need to be able to deal with kicks, tackles, throws, knives, weapons, and much more," We have to have a fighting style flexible enough to deal with a variety of situations, have it play to our quirk strengths, and be constantly improving it. So we don't become predictable and let someone take advantage of that. Spoke Kendo as she was examining Izuku's stance. Kinda like how Bakugo always starts a fight with a right hook. A smart villain could use that to their advantage, thought Izuku before he voiced a question. I get being able to properly defend, but wouldn't a punch-focused style benefit you more because of your quirk? Asked Izuku. True, and my fighting style does use a lot of punches, and with a strong enough quirk, it may not matter. All Might uses punches almost exclusively. But for me, most villains will expect me to just throw punches because of my quirk. So when I suddenly sweep their legs, for example, they won't expect it. Replied Kendo, explaining her thought process. Using their expectations against them. That's really clever of you, Kendo. Spoke Izuku with an earnest smile. Kendo blushed at his look. Thanks, my dad actually taught me that. But let's focus back on your stance. Turn your body this way so you expose as little of your body to your opponent as possible. Place your feet like this, it allows you to dodge quicker and helps you prevent getting hit in the balls. Spoke Kendo, adjusting his body so he took a more effective stance. Her hands deftly moved around, clearly experienced with teaching others. Good, now follow my lead and watch how I move. Spoke Kendo as she threw some practice punches and kicks at one of the dummies. Izuku paid close attention to Kendo doing his best to mimic her movements. After about an hour of this and several instances of Kendo correcting some of his little mistakes, Mrs. Koi Kendo entered the room with a tray that had a picture on it along with some sandwiches. The women paused for a moment and watched the two teens practicing. The scene reminded her of a near-identical moment of her and her husband, training in this very room when they were younger. A knowing smile broke out on her face as she recognized the look Itsuka was unknowingly giving Izuku. Hey, you two, I think it's about time for a quick break. I brought you some lemonade and sandwiches. Spoke as she approached, setting the tray down on a small table. Thanks, Mom. Spoke Itsuka as she poured some lemonade into the glasses and passed one to Izuku. Thank you very much. Spoke Izuku, kindly taking one of the sandwiches. You're welcome. Just let me know if you two need anything. Responded as she moved to leave but stopped short by the door. By the way, Midoriya, I'm a little curious, what is your quirk? Itsuka never gave us much detail. Asked. Izuku took a moment to swallow the food in his mouth before responding. My quirk is a mutation of my mom's. It's called tactile telekinesis. It's just a strength enhancer, nothing special. Spoke Izuku, using the cover story he and All Might had come up with as a believable explanation of his quirk. He's just being modest. He destroyed a robot that was easily taller than a 20-story building with one punch. Spoke Itsuka, her praise causing Izuku to blush. Mrs. Kendo was stunned by her daughter's words and honestly had trouble believing that the shy, polite, and soft-spoken young man in front of her could be that powerful. Sounds like a strong quirk for a hero. I'll be sure to route for you when you go pro. Spoke in a you can do it like tone, after which she left the room. Izuku and Itsuka continued their break. Kendo, can I ask about your parents' quirks? You have your mom's quirk, right? Asked Izuku. His excitement for analyzing quirks showed itself as he pulled out a notebook from nowhere, which greatly confused Kendo as to where he was carrying it. My mom can increase the size of her hands, but it's only her hands. My dad's quirk lets him increase his base strength by 10 times. My quirk is actually a fusion of their quirks. My strength scales with the size of my hands, but I do have a max size that I can't exceed, and I can't really make my feet or other body parts bigger. Answered Itsuka, activating her quirk to its maximum size to demonstrate. Alright, break over next. I'll show you how to properly throw an opponent. Spoke Kendo, shrinking her hand back down and moving to the center of the room. Okay, responded Izuku, bounding over to Itsuka, eager to continue the training. The two kept training until it was 1 p.m., leaving Izuku an hour to get back to Ua, take a shower, get changed, and still have some time before his training with Principal Nezu. Thank you for helping me and for inviting me over kendo, and thank you for allowing me over," spoke Izuku, bowing to the mother and daughter. "You're welcome. Maybe next time you and your parents could come over for dinner," spoke kindly. Her true motives went unnoticed by the two teens. "Thank you for the offer. I'll let my mom know," responded Izuku, making a mental note to mention it when he calls his mother tonight. "Be sure to practice what I showed you. I'll see you in class Monday," spoke Kendo with a smile and a small wave. "I will. See you Monday," spoke Izuku, waving goodbye as he left. The mother and daughter both re-entered their home. "You were spot on, Itsuka. He seems like a very kind and polite young man, but I find it hard to believe that he's in the hero course, let alone as strong as you say," spoke, setting the figurative hook. "That's because you haven't seen him in action. I had a front row seat to him beating the zero-pointer, and on the first day of class, he threw a softball several kilometers. Plus, he's not just some muscle brain, he got the fastest time in our first hero course by actually predicting his opponent's moves perfectly and came up with a winning strategy," spoke Itsuka, her tone conveying the respect she had for her classmate and perhaps something more that her mother immediately picked up on. "You like him, don't you? Aw, it's been a long time since my sweet little girl had a crush," spoke in an overdramatic manner. Itsuka had a massive blush on her face. "What, no, I just respect him a lot, and we've only known each other for a week," replied Itsuka, denying having such feelings. But she wasn't very convincing. "So, I knew I liked your father after only 2 weeks of knowing him. There's no shame in having a crush. You can admit you find him cute and charming," spoke Mrs. Telekendo, teasing her daughter. "We're just classmates and nothing more," spoke Itsuka, ignoring how a small voice in her head added yet to the end of her statement. Okay, if you say so," spoke, raised her hands in mock surrender. Itsuka calmed down, her blush dying down, turned to enter the kitchen, but she stopped and tapped her chin with a finger in a pondering gesture. "But I do find it rather odd that you invited him over instead of just training at school. I wonder why you did that," spoke, a smirk on her face as she walked away. Itsuka's blush returned with a vengeance as she pondered if she did like the cinnamon roll that was Izuku. She buried her face in her hands. UA main building. Izuku quickly returned to the dorms, took a quick shower, and changed into fresh clothes. Then Izuku caught up on the local hero news for the next 20 minutes. After which he gathered all his hero analysis notebooks and eagerly made his way to the principal's office, pondering exactly how the principal was planning on training him. The door to the Nezu's office opened before he could even knock. "Please come in," spoke Nezu. Izuku practically bounced into the room. Principal Nezu was seated behind his large wood desk, a cup of tea in hand. "Thank you again for agreeing to train me," spoke Izuku with a deep bow. "You seem very excited, and it's my pleasure to help teach you," responded Nezu with a chuckle. "Yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of training you have in store for me. I've been thinking about it for the last few days," spoke Izuku, honestly rubbing the back of his head. "Oh well, what did you come up with?" asked Nezu, putting his cup down. "Well, I thought it would be logic puzzles, reading books on tactics, analyzing people, or a fake crime scene to analyze. Maybe even chess or Go. Things along those lines mainly," spoke Izuku. Nezu nodded in approval. "You are correct, those are some of the things I will be using to train you. But today will be something special," spoke Nezu, praised Izuku as he got off his chair and moved to a bookshelf that had a chess set with pieces already on it. Nezu moved some of the pieces, and after a moment a beep was heard along with the sound of something unlocking. The entire bookshelf then sunk into the wall and then moved to one side. "Come along," spoke Nezu, entering the secret room. Izuku quickly moved to follow the principal. Inside was a large room that had sealed glass cases with books and miniatures in them. The most prominent feature was a large high-tech looking table that had seating for multiple people. "Wow, this is so cool. What is all this stuff?" asked Izuku as he looked at a beautiful model of a man named Carl wielding a warhammer atop a massive griffin. This is my brother's collection. He collects models, tabletop role-playing games, and other things from the pre-Quirk era. Those models are from a Carrigsprol-like game. Most of these models are not made anymore," explained Nezu, slipping into German for a moment. "That means most of this stuff is at least a couple hundred years old," thought Izuku before he picked up a particular part of that statement. "Wait, Principal Nezu, did you just say you have a brother?" spoke Izuku, wondering if he had heard wrong. "Yes, I did. His name is Andy, and he was one of the test subjects in the lab I was made in. I was created in part using his DNA along with several other people. He was the first person there to accept me as a sentient being. The first thing he ever said to me was, 'Well, they made you using my DNA, and I'm too young to be a dad, so you're my brother now,'" spoke Nezu with a chuckle as he recalled a memory. "How old was he?" asked Izuku, curious about the situation. "He was around your age when I met him. They were experimenting on him and others for their quirks. Not because they were particularly strong, just to see what they could do with quirks," spoke Nezu, his anger slipping into his tone as his grip tightens on his cup. "But enough about that topic. You'll meet him sooner or later. He is the vice principal. But he is currently working to get more funding and staff so we can expand the hero course, and he is laying the groundwork to get more international students into UA," explained Nezu. Izuku's eyes widened in understanding. "Wow, that sounds like he wants to make UA more on par with the other top international hero schools," spoke Izuku, recalled how most of the other top hero schools had hero courses in the triple digits, more international students, and a lot more specialized classes on offer. "That is exactly what he's doing. It's been taking him longer than we anticipated, which is why Midnight has been extra mischievous as of late. But he'll be back before midterms are here. Now let's get to training. We will be playing a little war game, so while I read through those notebooks of yours, I want you to read through the rules," spoke Nezu as he pulled a tablet off a table, brought up something, and then handed it to Izuku. Izuku gave Nezu his hero notebooks. The two sat down on opposite sides of the high-tech table. Izuku started to mutter as he read, and Nezu calmly sipped his tea as he read through the notebooks. Hours ticked by and Nezu was on notebook number 7, which was written when Izuku was about 8 years old. He found an entry mentioning how All Might was appearing less in public and had several theories on why. The younger Izuku had guessed that All Might was injured, but disregarded it since All Might was never reported to have had an injury. As he continued to read, Nezu grew more and more impressed with Izuzu. Nezu's face grew a look of such sadistic glee that it could send a shiver up the spines of the most veteran hero and the most hardened villains. "Principal Nezu, I'm finished," spoke Izuku. Nezu turned his attention to Izuku and put a bookmark in the notebook he was reading. "Wonderful. Then that means we can get started," spoke Nezu, pushing a button on the table. The table lit up, revealing itself to be a screen of some kind. A holographic landscape rose from the table. It depicted a forest split in two by a valley with a river.
"Wow, so cool," whispered Izuku in awe at what he was seeing.
"Thank you. Powerloader gave it as a gift for my brother and me. Now select your units using the tablet. I have limited us both to the more basic units to start with," requested Nezu as he started taping his tablet. Izuku looked through the units available and carefully selected units that fit with the strategy he came up with while he was reading the rules. "Are you ready? Then let's begin," spoke Nezu as both armies appeared in front of their respective players, hidden from their opponent by a fog of war. Izuku gained a determined look, and the two would only stop their games due to the dorm's curfew. Sunday Gym Gamma. Vlad stood to one side of Gym Gamma with a stopwatch and his tablet. He paid close attention to Izuku, who was bounding through an obstacle course made of concrete that Cementos had made upon his request. In addition, several targets, villain drones, and traps were also sprinkled throughout the course. Vlad watched with no small amount of pride. Izuku had been improving rapidly so far, absorbing his lessons like a sponge and applying that knowledge during the training. I should take Power Loader and Cementos out drinking as a thank you for helping me set this up, thought Vlad. Izuku was tearing through the course, navigating the obstacles by bouncing off some of the concrete walls, clearly imitating Mirko's movements. But the movements were sloppy nowhere near Mirko, and he could only string about 3 wall jumps in a row. But he was improving, and the numerous broken and charred villain bots were a testament to that. Izuku felt his heartbeat in his chest and the power of one for all course through his body as he dove past a concrete fist that smashed into the ground. He rolled when he hit the ground and used the momentum to kick a villain bot into scrap. He continued to run, dodging some fake blades that popped out of one of the walls. He was in the final stretch. He punched a villain bot, threw a second bot into 2 more, and axe kicked the last one so hard it resembled a crushed soda can. Izuku broke out into a full sprint, built up some speed, and jumped through a ring suspended from the ceiling. As he cleared the ring, he grabbed a rope and used it to swing himself. During the swing, Izuku rescued a civilian that was about to fall into lava. Izuku let go of the rope and landed past the finish line, and immediately looked at Vlad for the results. You improved your time by about 25%, and you didn't damage the dummy. Well done, spoke Vlad, showing Izuku his time. Izuku, elated with his improvement, jumped in joy, only he still had full cowl going, and he easily almost hit the ceiling. Vlad chuckled good-naturedly as Izuku came back down, but then had to rub his eyes to make sure if he was just seeing things. Weird, could have sworn he stopped falling for a moment. Maybe a break is in order. We have been at this since 5 a.m. though, Vlad, as Izuku landed. Izuku, how about we take a break and go get something to eat, proposed Vlad. Izuku's stomach answered for him by growling loudly. Yeah, that sounds good, spoke Izuku in agreement, embarrassed by his stomach. Lunch rush doesn't work on Sundays, so we will have to get our own food. Come on, I know this place that makes great takeout. My treat, spoke Vlad with a smile and smacked Izuku's back. Yes, sensei? But sensei, shouldn't I switch out of my costume if we're going outside? Asked Izuku, gesturing to his uniform. Vlad thought for a moment. No, it's all right for you to keep it on. You just have to change back into it when we get back anyway. Besides, I can teach you a bit about patrolling and civilian interaction on the way, spoke Vlad. He left Gym Gamma. Izuku excitedly fell in step beside Vlad. The teacher and student left school grounds, making their way through the city streets. Vlad taught the basics of the different kinds of patrols, how they are set up, where to go, and what suspicious behavior to look out for. The duo had stopped twice on their way to launch, once by a pair of women who wanted Vlad's autograph and some pictures. The 2 women even gushed over Vlad's cute sidekick, which predictably flustered the teenager and amused the pro-hero. The second time they paused because Vlad noticed an elderly couple that turned out to be lost. So Vlad gave them the proper directions to their destination. It wasn't long after this encounter that they made it to a small roadside restaurant named Ramen Ikaraku that had a bar open to the outside. Izuku noticed that things seemed to be pretty busy as most of the seats were filled. A blonde-haired man in an orange and black jumpsuit that had fox ears, whiskers, and 9 foxtails. Next to him was a beautiful woman in a purple and white hoodie with dark hair and featureless white eyes. There was an orange-haired man in a black shihakusho with a giant sword on his back, along with a whole bunch of other people dressed in similar attire. Finally, there was a small group consisting of a bald man with arrow tattoos on his head, a blind woman who was in a contest of some sort with a dark-skinned man in blue. There also a girl in similar blue attire, siblings most likely. There was also a couple in red with the man having a burn scar over part of his face, and the women looked kinda depressed. Midorira, come on, grab a seat, called out Vlad, who was already seated. Yes, sensei, responded Izuku, putting away his notebook, and took the open bar stool between Vlad and the fox man. Izuku pulled off his hood and removed his respirator mask. The delicious smell coming from the kitchen in front of him made it difficult to keep his mouth from watering. A girl in a uniform approaches them. She seems only a few years older than him. Hey Ken-sama, who's the fresh face? Seems a bit young to be a sidekick, spoke the girl clearly familiar with Vlad. Hey this is Izuku Midoriya. He is one of my students, responded Vlad politely. Really well, I look forward to seeing you at the sports festival in a few weeks. I'll be sure to cheer you on. So what can I get you too? Asked Iam sweetly as she pulled out a notepad and a pen. I'd like 2 bowls of my usual, 1 for me and 1 for the boy. We have more training after lunch, spoke Vlad. Iam quickly wrote down the order and then ripped the page out of the notepad. All right, those should be rig, started Iam, but she was cut off by a yell from the end of the bar. Hey, can I get more of this stuff? Oh, and more meat, yelled a heavily scarred man with bells in his hair formed the group of black-clad swordsmen. Kenny, that's rude, spoke what appeared to be a younger girl with pink hair. Your food should be out shortly, spoke Ian, clearly a little irritated at the group as she placed some iced water in front of them and then moved over. I stopped a villain who was trying to rob the place. Tuchai over there gave me a meal on the house and I've been a regular here ever since, answered Vlad with a nostalgic tone in his voice as he gestured to the chief in the kitchen. Now Midoriya, what do you think about your progress with your quirk? Asked Vlad, glancing at his student. I honestly thought I'd take much longer to gain any sort of control, so I'm happy to have full cowl. But I still have a long way before I get full control of my quirk, let alone become a pro hero or live up to the belief people have put in me. So I'd still like to keep training with you, Vlad-sensei, if that's okay, spoke Izuku, avoiding his normal self-deprecation. Personally, I think you're ready to properly stand on par with the rest of your class. However, if you want more after-school training, I don't mind, but I think it would be good to train with some of your classmates or some of the other teachers. It's good to face a variety of quirks. The varied techniques and perspectives could inspire you to use your quirk in creative ways, spoke Vlad wisely as the Chief Tuchai placed 2 hot bowls of ramen in front of them. Thank you, Sensei. Training with others sounds like a good idea, spoke Izuku as he pulled the bowl closer to him. The piping hot ramen smelt amazing. You're welcome, but I can't train you the week before the sports festival. I and the other teachers have last-minute arrangements and meetings to do. Now eat up, Midoriya. We still have plenty of training left for today, and I'll see if Snipe or Midnight want to help out, spoke Vlad as he dug into his food. Izuku, despite being slightly worried about possibly training with Midnight, happily dug into his bowl. Vlad made small talk with the chief as he ate. Izuku meanwhile was going through some of the lessons Nezu taught him in order to come up with countermeasures against his teachers and classmates. When Izuku was about halfway finished with his bowl, Vlad spoke. By the way, Midoriya, how did your training with News go yesterday? Do anything interesting? Asked Vlad, curious. Oh, it went well, I think. We mainly just played various games the whole time, replied Izuku. Ah, must have been frustrating to lose the whole time. Nezu doesn't really hold back when he plays, commented Vlad, understanding and sympathy in his voice as he grabbed his glass to finish his drink. Actually, most of the time we ended in a draw, and I only lost in 2 of the games, spoke Izuku. His words caused Vlad to spit, take, and for everyone there to stare at him in disbelief. The restaurant was deadly silent and several patrons were frozen in the middle of eating. Izuku grew self-conscious and nervous at becoming the center of attention. WW what? Questioned Izuku, looking around the room, utterly confused at the reaction. Class 1B Monday morning. The entirety of Class 1B eagerly waited for the Hero 101 class to begin. The class was abuzz with conversion, talking about their weekends and exactly what the rescue training would consist of. So Izuku, how was your date with Kendo on Saturday? Teased Setsuna, her words making Izuku nervous and Kendo irritated, but embarrassed as she may have a little crush on Izuku. D-date? Squeaked out Kanoko in shock. Don't listen to her. She's just trying to mess with Izuku. He just came to my family's dojo for some hand-to-hand combat training, explained Kendo, throwing Setsuna a light glare. You're no fun, replied Setsuna cheekily, sticking her tongue out at Kendo. Kanoko was internally relieved that Izuku didn't go on a date with Kendo. Before the conversion could continue, Vlad entered the room. Good afternoon. As I mentioned last week, you have rescue training today. All Might 13 and I will be your 3 instructors for this training. What you wear in this exercise is up to you. But I recommend you wear your costumes because if you find that they hinder your abilities, best find out now so you can have them altered. Now everyone gets changed. I'll meet you on the bus," spoke Vlad. "Yes, Vlad-sensei," spoke the class as one. Most moved to grab their costumes. Outside in front of the bus, Izuku quickly changed into his hero costume and met up with Kendo beside the bus. "Hey, Izuku, looks like we're the first to be ready. I already checked the bus. It's one of those open layout ones, so we don't need to organize the class," spoke Kendo diligently. "Oh, thanks, Kendo. Are you excited about the training?" asked Izuku. "Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how well my quirk works in rescue scenarios. I don't just want to be a hero that punches villains," spoke Kendo, a little self-conscious. "I think you'll do great. You have an attitude that is commanding yet kind. That will make calming down panicking civilians easier for you," commented Izuku. His compliment caused Kendo to look away, trying to hide the light blush on her cheeks. "Hey, the rest of the class seems to be here. We should get them on the bus," spoke Kendo hastily as she moved toward their classmates, a slightly confused Izuku following her. Class 1B all filed into the bus and took seats. Izuku sat in one of the 8 seats near the front of the bus that faced one another. Pony, Yanagi, and Tetsutetsu all sat on his side, and across from them were Kendo, Yui, Toguro, and Jirota. The rest of the class was seated in the back of the bus, and Vlad himself was driving the bus. The bus had been moving for a few minutes when he felt something touch his arm. Glancing down, all he saw was the sleeve of Yanagi's costume, but he could feel her hand on his arm. He looked towards the girl.
"Yes, Yanagi-chan?" asked Izuku in a kind tone.
"There is something I wish to inquire about you," spoke Yanagi in her normal eloquent manner, her visible blue eyes meeting Izuku's green ones. Sure, what did you want to ask?" replied Izuku, not even a little nervous despite Yanagi still resting her hand on his arm. The students nearby all seemed interested. "Exactly how does your quirk function? For it bears a resemblance to All Might's own, in my opinion," asked Yanagi. Izuku kept his best poker face, but internally he was freaking out trying to remember the details of the cover story. "Wait, hold on, Yanagi, you're forgetting that Izuku hasn't had his quirk for very long. He's probably still getting a feel for it. Besides, All Might doesn't hurt himself with his quirk. That makes a huge difference," spoke Tetsutetsu, interrupting Yanagi. "Your statement does ring true," replied Yanagi, her tone still monotone. "But still, I bet it's cool to have a simple augmenting type quirk. You can do a lot of flashy stuff with it. My steel is pretty strong and can destroy bad guys in a fight, but it doesn't look all that impressive," spoke Tetsutetsu as he activated his quirk, causing his skin to turn to steel. No way, I think it's really awesome looking. You're definitely pro-martial with a quirk like that," spoke Izuku earnestly. "You really think so? Seems like it'd be easier to be a popular hero if I had something flashy. My quirk can only go so far since it has a set hardness. Plus, I can suffer from iron fatigue if I hold it for too long, so improving myself is going to be difficult," replied Tetsutetsu, resolve in his words. Izuku pulled out his notebook. Well, if your body absorbs iron faster than a normal human, you could potentially carry custom high-concentrated iron supplements in case you need them in the field. Also, if you learned the right combination of martial arts, you could improve your effectiveness in close combat. Also, you could potentially thicken the steel on certain areas of your body, thus making you more durable. But that could limit mobility from the added weight. "But what about?" spoke Izuku as he descended into full-blown muttering. "Those are nice ideas, but should we stop him?" spoke Toguro as everyone looked at their class rep muttering away. "Do you have something to help me, Izuku?" asked Pony. There was a slight delay before Izuku addressed the question. Pony looked at his notebook as he shifted to an entry on her. There was a sketch of her in her hero costume along with notes and annotations. A possible improvement to Pony's costume that will let her fly much easier would be to add loops to her costume, so she can put a pair of horns through them, allowing for more stable flight. Spoke Izuku as he made alterations to the sketch. Pony was excited, wishing she could have altered her costume before this class. Cool, do Yanagi next, spoke Juzo. Yangi should carry some small objects to use her quirk, such as ball bearings to use as weapons. Depending on the maximum range of her quirk, she could carry some micro cameras for reconnaissance and surveillance. Explained Izuku as he was still not really paying attention and muttering away. All right, that's enough, spoke Kendo, stopping anyone else from asking another question. Yanagi gently squeezed Izuku's arm, breaking him out of his muttering. Izuku grew very embarrassed after he realized his actions, but the look she gave him and another reassuring squeeze calmed him down. We're here, called out Vlad, drawing the class's attention. As the bus slowed to a stop, the class all shuffled out of the bus. Waiting for them in front of the massive dome was the pro-heroine 13. Hello everyone, I've been waiting for you, greeted 13 as she stood before the class in her white space suit-like costume. Despite having already met the space-themed heroine during orientation, the students were still excited by her presence. Come on, I can't wait to show you what's inside, spoke 13, gesturing to the front door. She led them inside, and the whole class looked out in awe of the facility before them. Holy crap, it looks like an amusement park, spoke Tetsutetsu. Vlad was amused by seeing his students' reactions to the Aste. A shipwreck, a landslide, a fire, a hurricane ect. I created this training facility to prepare you for different types of disasters. I call it the unexpected simulation joint, but you can call it us-G, explained 13, striking a dramatic pose at the end. Fucking adorable, thought Vlad at 13's antics as he noted that they were missing someone. Hey, 13, shouldn't All Might be here already? Asked Vlad as he approached 13. He did too much hero work on the way to school this morning and used up all his power. He's resting in the teacher's lounge, answered 13 quietly so the students while holding up 3 fingers. Well, it can't be helped. We can handle the class with just the 2 of us. Let's get started, spoke Vlad, getting the students' attention. Excellent. Before we begin, let me just say one thing. Maybe 2 things, possibly 3, 4, or 5. Spoke 13, beginning to ramble and second guesses her statements. 13, I think they get it, spoke Vlad. Listen carefully. I'm sure you're aware that I have a powerful quirk. It's called Black Hole. I can use it to suck up anything and turn it into dust, spoke 13 in a very serious manner. Yeah, you've used your black hole to save a lot of people from disasters, added Izuku, unable to help himself from nerding out a little. That's true, but my quirk could also very easily be used to kill. Some of you also have powers that could be dangerous. Please don't forget that if you lose focus or make the wrong move, your powers can be deadly. Even if you're trying to do something virtuous like rescue, to Vlad's assessment, you all have a solid idea of your quirk's potential, and All Might's combat training you experience how dangerous your quirks can be when used against other people. Carry those lessons over to this class. Today you're going to learn how to use your quirks to save people's lives. You won't be using your quirks to attack enemies or each other, only to help. After all, that's what being a hero is all about, ensuring the safety of others. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening, spoke 13, ending her speech with a bow. The students all applied 13's speech. All right, everyone, now that's done, we can, started Vlad before the lights all around the facility went out. The hairs on the back of Vlad's neck stood on end, and his instincts were ringing like alarm bells. Vlad's head snapped toward the central plaza of the Asujin, where he saw a dark purple mass with eyes grow, and a man with disembodied hands step out of the swirling mass, followed by more and more villains, and a giant bird man with an exposed brain. Everyone stay together and don't move, yelled Vlad, as his body tensed. Has the training started? Questioned Oace, taking a step forward to get a better look.
Stay back. This is real. Those are villains, spoke Vlad as blood flowed out of his gauntlets. It floated through the air, ready to harden at a moment's notice.
The only heroes I see are Vlad King and 13. Perplexing, according to the schedule I retrieved, All Might should be here, spoke the mist villain. Bastards used the media last week as a distraction, growled out Vlad as the mass of villains marched closer. Where is he? I went to all the trouble of setting up this raid party to deal with All Might, the symbol of peace. I can't believe he's not here. Maybe if we kill a few brats, that will trigger the boss, spoke the hand villain, glaring hatefully at the heroes. Senpai, the alarms aren't going off, spoke 13, clearly a little distraught. One of them must be jamming our sensors, and they're most likely blocking our regular communications. They chose this isolated location. They are organized and prepared. Our team, get the students out of here and alert the main campus. I'll cover your escape, spoke Vlad with authority. But Vlad-sensei, there are so many of them. I know you specialize in group fights like this, but can you really handle this many villains alone? Asked Izuku, worried about his teacher. Don't worry, I'll just have to push past my limits and go plus ultra. 13, I'll leave it to you, spoke Vlad as the blood around his gauntlets hardened into a pair of warhammers. Vlad leaped off the top of the stairs and hit the ground running, closing the distance between him and the villains. Shooting squad forward, yelled a villain as he and 4 more villains moved closer to Vlad and unleashed a swarm of projectiles at the pro hero. Vlad created a blood shield that hid his whole body. The shield easily weathered the storm of bullets, knives, and other such missiles intended to murder him. The villains, panicking at the ineffectiveness of their attacks, doubled their efforts in the desperate hope of overwhelming Vlad's defenses. Vlad surprised the villains when he suddenly leapt forward, closing the distance between them, and shield bashed one of the villains while simultaneously sweeping the feet out under a second. Vlad brought a hammer down on the prone villain's gut, knocking her out. He grabbed the villain stunned by his shield bash and threw him into 2 of the other villains before elbowing another villain that was sneaking up behind him in the face. Shifting his shield to another hammer, he brought both down, each hitting a villain's face in the heap. The third villain in the heap getting a swift kick to the face, knocking them out and losing a few teeth. Vlad turned to the rest of the villains, his face one of cold fury and grim resolve. The villains all hesitated for a moment. I ain't afraid of you. That blood of yours can't hurt my rock body, yelled a masked 4-armed rock-like villain charging him. The villain got in close and started throwing sloppy punches, which Vlad dodged, weaving through the punches with ease. Are you sure about that? Spoke Vlad as the blood weapons melted and reformed around his fist, making blood brass knuckles, which he used for a devastating punch to the villain's face, which sent the villain flying back and left him unmoving in the dirt. Vlad moved his head to dodge a punch from an ogre-like villain that was easily twice his size. Vlad grabbed the limb and uppercutting the arm at the elbow with his blood knuckles. The villain howled in pain as he lashed out with another punch. Vlad dodged the blow, ducking under it and ending up on the villain's left, where he sent a low kick to the back of the villain's knee, causing him to partly collapse to his knees. With the villain's head now closer, Vlad lashed out with a blood warhammer again that rose up and hit the villain in the chin, causing him to tumble over defeated. Vlad immediately rolled to the side, dodging a villain with multiple arms wielding swords. His blood shifted into an English longsword. Vlad swung the sword the villain went to block with her own, not noticing the smirk on Vlad's face. The blood sword cut right through the metal blades like a hot knife through butter. How? Questioned the female villain, looking at the now useless blades in shock. Instead of answering her, Vlad took advantage of her dropped guard and struck her with the pommel, eliminating her from the fight. I won't let you hurt my students, you scum, roared Vlad, his blood weapon ready to strike out at any moment. I need to buy time for the class to escape. I can't hesitate. I can't hold back. Even if I have to cut some of them down, even if I have to die, I will not let them get to the kids, thought Vlad, fully resolved to give his life in defense of his students. There he goes trying to intimidate us. He's not hesitating to be brutal. And since we only have melee characters left, we're forced to get in close. Even when they work together and we rely on each other's powers, he has the advantage. Spoke the villain Shigaraki, watching as Vlad sent a villain flying with a hammer blow and then blowing out another villain's knee with a kick. How annoying. The worst thing about dealings with pros is when they live up to all their hype. Spoke Shigaraki, scratching his neck, as he watched Vlad become a virtual whirlwind sweeping through the cannon fodder villains. Wow, he's holding them off. I should have had more faith in him. Spoke Izuku as he looked back at his teacher for a moment as the rest of Class 1B was running for the exit. Kendo noticed that Izuku had stopped running. "Izuku, this is not the time. You can analyze later, we have to go," yelled Kendo, not noticing the use of his first name. Izuku didn't notice as he started to run, falling in step with her. Before the class made it halfway to the door, the purple mist villain appeared in front of them. 13 and the class stopped in their tracks. "There is no escape from here," spoke the villain Kurogiri. "Damn it," thought Vlad, noticing that the warp villain had gotten to the class. Vlad head-butted the villain he was grappling with in the nose before punching them away. He tried to make a run for the stairs, but was blocked by more villains. "It is a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say, besides, isn't this a fitting place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to take his last breath? I believe he was supposed to be here today, yet I see no sign of him. There must have been some sort of change in plans that we could not have foreseen. Ah well, in the end, I suppose it doesn't matter. I still have a role to play," spoke Kurogiri eloquently as he spread out, growing in size. 13, who had subtly opened one of the caps at the end of her costume's fingers in order to use her quirk. But before she could attack, Tetsutetsu, Rin, and Toguru all leapt at the mist villain, lashing out at him. "Ha! Did you really think we'd just stand around and not fight back?" yelled Tetsutetsu. "You live up to your school's reputation, but you should be more careful, children, otherwise someone might get hurt," spoke Kurogiri, eyes narrowing dangerously. "You three get out of the way right now," ordered 13, not able to use her quirk with the student in the firing line. "I'll scatter you across this facility to meet my comrades and your deaths," yelled Kurogiri, enveloping the heroes in his mist-like body. Everything went black for the heroes. Ruins Zone. A student dropped out of a portal in the Ruins Zone, landing right where they agreed upon. As they got their bearings, they noticed that they were surrounded by villains, but instead of attacking him, the student pulled out a flash drive and passed it to one of the villains. "Hey, why didn't you tell us that All Might was a no-show? Isn't that why you're even in this dump?" questioned a villain. "Cut me some slack. Even Vlad King was surprised that All Might wasn't here. Besides, I was the one to swipe the lesson plan from the teacher's office and give you the information on my class's quirks in the first place," spoke the traitor with slight anger. "Good enough for me. So boss, what do we need to help you with?" spoke another villain sarcastically. "I am supposed to be the miraculous survivor of this little party, so I can keep an eye on the school for the League, in case they want to attack the school again after you all kill All Might and the students. It is a shame, though some of those hero wannabes would look nice naked at my feet," explained the traitor flatly, a demented smile as they imagined themselves on a throne, some of their classmates, collared, naked, submissive, and of course, serving them sexually. "Hurry it up, kid. I still want to play with some of those little heroes, maybe even keep a cute one for myself," spoke a female villain with spider-like features as she licked her lips with an unnaturally long tongue. "Here's a tip, then check the downpour zone. You should find a green-haired kid, pretty meek, and his quirk breaks him. Personally, he's the kind that annoys me the most, so be sure to have fun," spoke the traitor with an evil chuckle as they pull out their phone to show a picture of Izuku in his hero costume. "Oh, this little rabbit looks delectable. I can't wait to taste him," spoke the spider villainess hungrily and sadistically. "All right, now I just need you all to rough me up enough to convince the heroes. Then I'll find a decent hiding place till the heroes show up." "Got it?" explained the traitor, a smirk on their lips. "Got it," responded the villains. "A Steve Flood Zone. Ever since the entrance exam, Kanoko had been thinking of him, having daydreams about him. At first, they were rather innocent, being heroes side by side, innocent dates, going to cosplay events together, and things of that nature. But after the battle trail and the incident in the cafeteria, her dreams had escalated. She couldn't even think about it without blushing. Due to this, she was having sneaking glances at him in his hero costume, which was very cute in her opinion. Despite her embarrassment, she was very excited about the training and hoped that she'd be paired up with Izuku for the rescue training. Overall, it looked like it would be a great Monday for Kanoko. But then the villains showed up and everything started falling apart. She was terrified when the villains had first appeared. She knew that as a hero she'd have to fight villains eventually, but this was too soon. She wasn't ready for this. When the mist villain Kurogiri cut off their escape and declared their goal was to kill All Might, her heart dropped into her stomach. Then the villain suddenly grew in size, moving to envelop the class. She tried to make her way to Izuku, but everything went black just before she could reach him. That is what led her to her current situation, falling rapidly toward the water of the flood zone. She screamed in panic as she fell, but she was able to compose herself enough to take a deep breath and closed her eyes just before she hit the water. When she opened her eyes, she immediately looked around and spotted a villain with a harpoon gun for an arm.
"Sorry, kid. Nothing personal. I'll make it quick," yelled out the villain, clearly excited at the idea of killing her slowly despite his words. The villain shot 4 spears at her. She did try to avoid the attack, but her costume was hindering her movements in the water.
Suddenly, a pair of arms wrapped around her and pulled her up out of the water. Kanoko felt a sharp pain in one of her legs. She took a breath as soon as she was above water, filling her lungs with oxygen. "Don't worry, I got you," spoke a waterlogged pony. The American was balanced precariously on a pair of her horns. Kanoko looked down toward the pain in her leg, only to see one of the harpoons logged in one of her calves. Kanoko was in shock as she watched blood slowly start to leak out of the wound. Pony flew as fast as she could, heading for the ship in the center of the flood zone. Several villains broke the surface to attack them. Pony was able to dodge some of them, and several random nautical objects pelted the other villains courtesy of Yanagi, who stood on the ship's deck. Pony took advantage of the temporary opening to zoom past the villains and made it onto the ship. Kanoko hissed in pain when her injured leg touched the deck. Manga's head turned into an exclamation point, displaying his surprise. "Kanoko, are you all right?" "Wait, of course you're not okay. What do we do? Are we supposed to leave it in or take it out?" spoke Pony, panicked after she spotted the injury, not knowing what to do. Yanagi also ceased her attack on the villains to look at her classmates. Her eyes widened, her hands spazzed out for a moment before she regained her composure and clenched her hands into fists. "Manga, I require you to keep the villains at bay for the time being," spoke Yanagi in her normal monotone. Her words snapped her classmates out of their panicking state. Manga gave her a quick salute before popping up from behind the ship's railing and activating his quirk. Tiny speech bubbles rapidly shot out of his head like a machine gun. "Daka, daka, 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 daka." The salvo of bullet-sized speech bubbles forced the villains to dive underwater. Little bursts of water denoting where they struck the water. Using her quirk, Yanagi ripped the sleeves of her costume off and ripped them into strips. She moved closer to Kanoko and examined the injury carefully, doing her best to remember what her parents had taught her. The projectile has only done damage to soft tissue. It has not struck bone nor severed any of the major blood vessels in the region. It would seem fortune was with you. "Pony, I shall require your great strength in this endeavor," spoke Yanagi to her classmates as she grabbed the waterlogged hat off of Kanoko's head and folded it a few times. "How do you know what to do?" questioned Kanoko, partly trying to distract herself and partly from genuine curiosity. "My mother and father are both physicians specializing in the field of surgery. They taught me the basics of first aid. This next action will hurt. Please bite down on this to help alleviate some of the pain," responded Yanagi, passing Kanoko the folded hat. Kanoko immediately bit down on the hat and took one of Yanagi's hands. Pony, please sunder the harpoon in this location. We must remove the excess, immobilize the object, and bandage the wound until a professional can properly treat it. Explained Yanagi, pointing with her free hand to where the harpoon needs to be broken. Pony nodded and took a firm hold of the weapon and looked at Yanagi. Kanoko braced herself for the pain just as the ghost girl gave a quick nod. Snap! Went the harpoon, breaking like a twig under Pony's superior strength. Yelled Kanoko, her cry of pain muffled by her hat. Yanagi quickly and carefully wrapped the wound using her improvised bandages to immobilize the object and stop the bleeding. The mushroom girl gave another muffled cry of pain and squeezed Yanagi's hands tight. Okay, that should prove sufficient for the time being, spoke Yanagi as she checked to make sure the bandages were properly applied. She turned to check on how Manga was doing. Manga dove away from the railing just as numerous projectiles flew through the air right where he was standing and embedded into the wall behind him. A shadow fell over them as a giant hand constructed of water rose above the ship. The teens scrambled out of the way as the hand crushed part of the ship, causing it to start to sink. It'll only take a few minutes for the ship to sink. Once they're in the water, they're doomed, yelled out one of the villains as he directed his fellow villains. How we going to leave here? Questioned Pony, her Japanese coming out weird due to her nervousness at the situation. If you can carry Manga and then I may carry Kanoko using my quirk. But we must incapacitate those degenerates in the water before we make our attempt to withdraw, spoke Yanagi as the 4-1B students all brainstormed for possible solutions. Manga, can you make electricity with your quirk? Asked Kanoko. Manga nodded his head, which was now shaped like a thunderbolt, but then shifted into an hourglass, articulating that he needed time. Okay, Rieko, and I will buy you time then, spoke Pony with determination as she launched some of her horns and made them float around her ready to attack the villains. Yanagi gave a nod to Pony as she lifted numerous objects to hurl at the villains. The two heroines waited for the right moment, then both popped up and shot their own projectiles back at the villains. Yanagi caught some of the villains' projectiles and shot them back at the villains, while Pony used a swarm of her horns to beat up any villain dumb enough to stay above water for too long, turning the fight into a deadly game of whack-a-mole. They kept this up for long enough for Manga to unleash a massive speech bubble. ZZZZZZZ PPPPPPPP. The speech bubble was shaped like a lightning bolt and was at least as long as the boat they stood on. The moment the speech bubble touched the water, the whole flood zone lit up as electricity arced through the water. The villains cried out as they were electrocuted. After the light died down, the hero students watched as a lot of the villains floated to the surface, groaning in pain. Let's go, spoke Pony in English, grabbing both Manga and Rieko, not wanting to wait for the villains to recover. The American girl hopped onto a pair of her horns and started to carefully fly upward. Rieko used her own quirk to grab hold of Kanoko, causing her to fly close by. The small group made a beeline for the shore as none of them wanted to get back in the water. After they landed, they quickly ducked into some of the bushes and trees nearby. Yanagi helped Kanoko walk, while Pony lends the way using her enhanced horse-like hearing to stay alert of any threats, and Manga making sure no one snuck up behind them. They came to a small break in the foliage and saw the plaza. Usji Central Plaza. The unconscious bodies of numerous villains were strewn about the plaza. Some bleeding, others with broken bones. Only a few villains were still standing. Vlad King jumped over several rock spikes. The unfortunate villain who summoned the spike got Vlad's knee in his face for his effort. The villain's nose broke with a crunch, and the villain fell to the ground clutching his bloody nose. Vlad hit the villain in the chest with a blood hammer, taking him out of the fight. Vlad ducked under a slash by a villain with bat-like arms and long, sharp claws. Vlad retaliates with a straight punch to the villain's gut, causing them to double over, which made Vlad's follow-up uppercut all the more devastating. Vlad took some deep breaths, thankful for the lull in combat. He knew was growing tired, The small wounds covering his body were proof of him nearing his limit. He looked around to take count of how many opponents he had left. He only saw the hand guy and the purple bird thing with him. Only those two left. With luck, 13 beat the warper and called the school for help. Once I beat these two, I can go looking for the students, thought Vlad as he gave the villains his full attention. Vlad looked at the two remaining villains. A tense moment passed before the hand villain started charging at him. Vlad also charged. The villain lashed out with a kick, but it was a feint as he went to grab Vlad. Vlad raised a blood shield with his left hand and formed a dagger in the other. "That won't work on me, scum," spoke Vlad, going to stab the villain with his other hand. But the villain caught the attack. "Are you sure about that?" questioned the villain behind the severed hand that served as a mask. Pain flared from Vlad's forearms. The blood hero's shield was instantly covered in spikes, and the dagger in his hand elongated. Before the villain could move away, he took several spikes to his palms, stomach, and arms. But the worst wound came from the dagger, which extended into one of his shoulders. The villain and Vlad both jumped back, making more distance between them. The villain was bleeding from the wounds from the spikes and was holding his shoulder. The villain glared at Vlad King. The center of Vlad's blood shield was gone, and his forearm looked bad. His costume, along with the skin on most of his forearm, was gone, exposing damaged muscle. His other arm was in a similar state, just closer to his wrist. "Damn, this hurts like hell. He must be the one that destroyed the school gate. It only took him a few moments to do this kind of damage. I have to be careful. If he gets a hold of the wrong spot, I'm dead. But it looks like the effect only comes from his hands. I have to disarm him, then I can deal with the bird guy," thought Vlad as he coated the wounds in hardened blood and created his blood sword. "Look at you, you're still standing. You didn't even hesitate to jump into the middle of us to protect your students, and look, you even took most of this group out, and you even did this to me. You really are so cool," spoke the villain in an unhinged tone. "But I'm done playing around, Namu," spoke the villain flatly. Vlad's instincts screamed, and he turned around to see that the Becked villain had somehow snuck up behind him. Vlad lashed out with his sword just as the bird villain threw a punch. The thing didn't even scream when its arm was cut off above the elbow. It just swung out with its other fist. Vlad created another blood shield to block. The shield cracked and Vlad was sent crashing into the plaza's fountain. The fountain was instantly turned into rubble, and a cloud of dust hung in the air for a moment. When the dust settled, Vlad rose out of the rubble, his head bleeding and his costume caked in dust. The pro hero used his quirk to pull his blood off of the surrounding rubble and pulled more of it back into his body, hardening the blood in his wounds as a temporary bandage. The groups of students hidden around the plaza, and Vlad watched as the stump where Namu's arm used to be suddenly exploded outward as bone and muscle was rapidly replaced. Namu's arm was fully regenerated in moments. Shocked but not discouraged, Vlad once more created a sword just as he was about to move to re-engage. Namu had already closed the distance in a terrifying display of speed. "Fast!" was all Vlad could think as the thing attacked. Vlad ducked low, dodging the punch, sent his way cutting off the limb and one of the creature's legs. Vlad, thinking that the thing would try and catch itself with its remaining arm, created a large two-handed axe. Vlad swung the axe overhead, aiming to chop off the thing's head before it could regenerate. But the creature chose to attack, throwing a strong backhand instead of trying to catch itself that Vlad barely dodged. The blow left a crater in the concrete floor and kicked up a small cloud of dust. The creature burst out of the cloud, limbs already healed. Vlad and the creature clashed several more times. The creature was undeterred as it lost arms, legs, and fingers. Vlad went to slice the thing in half, but it moved at the last moment, letting Vlad cut it from its left shoulder to its left hip. But the creature had gotten a hold of Vlad. The monster slammed Vlad into the ground. Spider web cracks spread from the point of impact. The creature squatted over Vlad, one hand wrapped around the teacher's arm, the other holding him down. "What do you think of him, Vlad King? He's the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace," spoke the hand villain smugly as Namu gave an unsettling shriek. Vlad looks over at the hand villain with rage in his eyes, and he gives the villains his response. The numerous wounds all over Vlad exploded into a dozen long blood spikes. The spikes punched through Namu's body, and several nearly pierced Namu's brain. Vlad's free arm flew forward, a blood dagger sliced through the air, and would have hit the hand villain in the neck if Namu hadn't thrown off Vlad's aim. The blood blade only nicked the villain's neck before it returned to being a liquid and splattered onto the ground. Namu snapped both of Vlad's arms like twigs in retaliation. Vlad screamed in pain before Namu smashed Vlad's head into the concrete floor. Vlad stopped moving after the blow, his breathing the only sign that he was still alive. Before the hand villain could order Namu to finish off Vlad King, the mist villain appeared beside him. "Tamura Shigaraki," spoke Kurogiri, naming the hand villain. "Kurogiri, did you manage to kill 13? Asked Shigaraki, turning his head toward Kurogiri. "The rescue hero has been taken out of commission, but there were students I was unable to disperse, and one of them, a boy that could swim through the ground like water. He was able to escape the facility," responded Kurogiri. Shigaraki proceeded to throw a childish tantrum, scratching at his own neck till raw. "Kurogiri, if you weren't our ticket out of here, I'd turn you to dust right now. We can't win if this place gets flooded with heroes. It's game over and back to the start screen. Let's go home. But before we leave, we should wreck the symbol of peace's pride," spoke Shigaraki as he turned and looked right at Pony, Yanagi, and Kanoko with murder in his eyes. Then, quick as a flash, he was in front of them, reaching out to touch Kanoko's and Yanaga's faces. They had no time to react, and even if they did, both were stunned in fear, their relatively short lives flashing before their eyes as death drew closer. "Don't touch them! Tesla smash!" yelled out the familiar voice of Izuku. Before Shigaraki could even turn his head, before even Namu could react, the sound of thunder roared throughout the Uschi, and for a brief moment the plaza lit up with a green light. Uschi downpour zone. When the darkness receded from his vision, Izuku found himself falling into a mock city that looked like it was in the middle of a typhoon. He was being pelted by rain, the high winds blew the young hero around like a kite. Izuku did not see any classmates falling around him or any villains on the streets below. Izuku frantically looked around, using his rapidly diminishing vantage point to find a suitable location to land, so he didn't crash into the ground. He spotted a long alley between two buildings that would work well for him. Izuku used the howling wind to his advantage to help steer him in the right direction. Nearing the alley, Izuku activated full cowl. "I need to do as many wall jumps as possible so I can land safely. If I don't time these right, I could really hurt myself or worse," thought Izuku nervously as he waited for his moment. Now, thought Izuku as he kicked off one of the alley walls, brick-dented and cracked from the combined force of full cowl and Izuku's momentum. Izuku repeated the action 5 more times, allowing him to regain some control of his fall. However, as he made contact with the ground, instead of stopping, the wet ground caused him to slip and forced him to roll. It wasn't the most graceful or softest of landings. He was sure he'd develop a couple of nasty bruises, but he was in one piece and in fighting shape. Izuku quickly stood, taking in his surroundings for danger. He landed near one of the ends of the alley. The alley was narrow, only really wide enough for 2 people to stand side by side comfortably. The alley itself is sparse with only a few pieces of trash and not much else. He stopped using full cowl to prevent the lighting he generated from giving his location away. He continuously edged his way to the exit of the alley, which seemed to open up into some sort of courtyard in the middle of the buildings. There were a few trees, flower beds, street lights, and benches. In the center of the courtyard was a colorful place, signs of anyone, villain or otherwise. But a part of Izuku was screaming at him that it was unwise to walk out into the open. Izuku heeded this feeling, choosing instead to ensure he wasn't going to be ambushed. Izuku peeked his head out slowly and scanned the building, checking windows and roofs for movement. He found it difficult to hear over the wind, rain, and the occasional boom of fake thunder. Izuku strained his hearing as he heard something faintly under the sounds of the artificial storm. The noise slowly grew louder and Izuku could now tell it was coming from above. Izuku looked up and tried to spot the source of the sound. Crash! The sound grew loud enough to hear over the storm before a loud crash of metal on metal came from the playground. "Damn, that hurt," yelled out the familiar voice of Tetsutetsu from the playground. "Tetsutetsu," spoke Izuku in concern as he ran to his classmate. Izuku carefully maneuvered through the mangled remains of the jungle gym and found his metal classmate. Izuku offered Tetsutetsu a hand. "Midoriya, man, it's good to see you," spoke Tetsutetsu, taking the offered hand and allowing Izuku to help pull him to his feet. "It's good to see you too, Tetsutetsu. Did you see anyone else while you were falling?" asked Izuku as he looked around. He knew that some villains would have heard Tetsutetsu's landing and would be rushing toward this location. "Yeah, I saw Jiroda, but I don't know where he is now. We have to go find him," yelled Tetsutetsu, not picking up on Izuku's caution. "I am here, Sir Tetsu," called out Jiroda, who jumped off a nearby fire escape, grabbed a branch of one of the trees that let him swing himself to them. The rain had caused his fur to stick flat against his body. "Nice. Have you seen anyone else, or is it just us?" asked Tetsutetsu as the three students moved toward one of the alleys to exit the courtyard. "You are the only members of our class I have found. I have not detected any one of our other classmates, but I am not sure the storm messes with most of my senses," responded Jiroda politely as he tapped his nose for emphasis. The artificial storm seemed to grow worse and Izuku snapped his head up. He could have sworn that he saw movement from one of the windows in his peripheral vision. But all he saw was a blown-out window with curtains flapping wildly in the wind. "I know what you mean. If I stay in this rain too long, I'll start to rust," complained Tetsutetsu. Jiroda suddenly spotted someone and stiffened, and then made his arms grow bulkier and more bestial. "Sir Midoriya, Sir Tetsu, we have company," spoke Jiroda as the villains started to enter the courtyard from the alleys. The criminal scum had not fully surrounded the students. The three students stood back to back as the villain taunted them. "How unfortunate. I was hoping to acquire one or two of the young heroines," spoke a very tall, lanky villain in a suit, several tentacles writhing angrily behind him as he stood head and shoulders above the villains around him. "Shut up, ya horny git. Just get ta kill 'em. Ya can get a girl later," bellowed a large green-skinned villain in black armor carrying a giant two-headed battle axe. "Come get some, you villainous scum," yelled Tetsutetsu, slamming his fists together, causing a metallic clang. 39 villains total, 5 south, 10 west, 11 east, 13 north. Villains mostly composed of mutant types and close combat quirks. Most likely because they knew the wind and rain would hamper most range combatants. The leader appears to be the large green-skinned villain with the axe to the north. The villain in the suit to the east also seems dangerous. If we stay in the open like this, they'll surround and overwhelm us. We need to eliminate their numbers advantage. The south has the least villains. If we can get to the alley behind them, then it will limit how many we have to fight at once. Plus, we'll only have to deal with 2 directions, and we can escape to the rooftops if we need to, thought Izuku, analyzing the villains, noting quirks, possible weak points, and leaders. The villains were a little creeped out from the look the hooded kid in the bunny ears and mask was giving them. The Izuku's incoherent mumbling only added to his off-putting aura. Izuku activated full cowl at 5% green lighting arcing over his body the moment he calls on his power. Some of the villains involuntarily took a step back, understandable cautious of getting near lighting in a rainstorm. "Since when could you do that?" questioned Tetsutetsu, surprised at what Izuku was doing. "I'll explain later. We need to move before they surround us. We're gonna break through the group on my right and get to the alley so they have to come at us 2 at a time. I'll lead the way and you 2 follow behind me. Once we're in the alley, we'll turn around and face them. We move on my signal, got it?" spoke Izuku without a single stutter in a voice just loud enough for his friends to hear. His tone is calm and full of authority. So manly, thought Tetsutetsu, holding back tears. "I am with you, Sir Midoriya." agreed Jiroda, bulking his legs up so he could move faster. Let's do it, Prez, spoke Tetsutetsu without hesitation. Let's go, spoke Izuku. Izuku exploded into motion with his green lighting in his wake. Izuku was already halfway to the villains by the time Jiroda and Tetsutetsu started moving. The 5 villains they were charging consisted of a man with mallet arms, a man with stretchy spring arms, a man with buzzsaw hands, a man wielding a ship's anchor, and a large man that looked to be a humanoid crab. Izuku leaped past the 2 villains in the front of the pack so he could drop-kick the carb villain. The carb man was able to raise a claw to block the kick. The man was shoved back by the blow, and the shell on his arm was cracked. Damn, the kid's stronger than he looks, spoke the crab villain. The villain with buzzsaw hands advanced to attack Izuku in the back. Let's see if you're tougher than you look, screamed the villain, his saw hand humming and raised to slash Izuku. Don't forget about us, spoke Tetsutetsu, who interposed himself between the villain and Izuku. Thaw blades meet steel skin as Tetsutetsu blocked the attack. The villain pulled back his hands only to find the teeth of his saw hands broken and worn down. Tetsutetsu socked the villain in the jaw. The villain was laid flat on the ground out cold. The villain with the spring arms sent several elongated punches at Jiroda. Jiroda kept his arms up guarding against the punches. Jiroda waited for the right moment and then sidestepped the villain's next punch as the elongated limb stretched past. Jiroda grabbed hold of it with one bulky arm. The villain paled right before Jiroda started spinning the villain like how an Italian plumber spins a turtle dragon. Once he was satisfied with the speed, Jiroda then released the villain straight into one of the other villain groups, knocking several over and buying them time. The crab villain lashed out with a yell, his claws stabbing toward Izuku. Izuku leaped over his aggressor and landed behind him. The villain's legs were swept out from under him. The villain fell face first into the ground. Izuku did not let the villain recover. The rabbit-themed hero raised a leg and brought down a powerful axe kick on top of the villain's armored back. The carapace and the ground underneath both gained spiderweb cracks from the force of the blow. The villain let out a pained grunt as the air in his lungs was forced out. Izuku turned to check on his classmates. Tetsutetsu was in a battle of strength with the anchor-wielding villain trying to wrestle the villain's weapon away from him, and Jiroda was fighting the villain with the mallet arms. The other villains were also moving toward them. Izuku picked up the unconscious crab villain and hurled him at the villain Tetsutetsu was fighting. "Tetsu, duck!" yelled Izuku as he blitzed the mallet villain, hitting the distracted villain with a nasty sucker punch. Tetsutetsu ducked as instructed and watched as the anchor villain was hit with his own comrade. Tetsutetsu took the opportunity to strike the anchor villain with his now dropped weapon, knocking him out. Tetsutetsu then threw the anchor at the approaching villains to slow them down. The 3 hero students then immediately turned and made for the alley. "You lot and the slender git, go and cut him off. The rest of you gits with me," ordered the large orc-like villain, hefting his axe in one hand and pointing to the villains in question. The minor villains quickly heeded the man's order and started to run. The villain in the suit did not run. Instead, he simply walked his long stride, allowing him to cover a lot of distance. The orc villain also walked steadily toward the hero students. The 3 students made it to about a third of the way into the alley before they turned to face the villains. Jiroda and Tetsutetsu stood side by side. Izuku stood just behind them. The villains that were chasing them quickly filed into the alley and charged them. However, Izuku's plan had worked. The villains were forced to come at them 2 at a time. As the first 2 villains moved closer, they were surprised when 2 bursts of air struck them in the face with the force of a heavyweight boxer. The 2 villains were stunned by the attack. Jiroda and Tetsutetsu both attacked the villains. Jiroda threw a nasty gut punch that knocked the wind out of the villain, causing them to double over, letting him knee the man in the face. Tetsutetsu simply threw a strong haymaker. The 2 villains behind the first pair moved forward, pushing aside their unconscious comrades. This cycle continued with Izuku peppering the villains with airbursts he created by flicking his fingers, and his 2 classmates took advantage, pummeling the villains in hand to hand. "Ha! We got you boxed in, now you brats!" yelled a villain from the alley entrance behind them. Izuku jumped up so he was above his friends, pressing all 4 fingers against his thumb and aimed at the mass of villains in front of Tetsu and Jiroda. "Shotgun smash!" yelled out Izuku as he flicks his fingers. 8 blasts of air shot out from his fingertips. A number of villains were hit with the attack, which caused some of their number to be knocked back into each other. "I'll handle the ones behind us, you guys just keep covering each other," ordered Izuku as he turned around to face the villains flanking them. The villains, overeager and undisciplined, charged into the alley one at a time in a staggered fashion. "Wait, where is the villain in the suit?" thought Izuku, noting the villain's absence. Izuku ran at the villains, rapidly sending finger flicks at them as he closed the distance. Before he clashed with the first villain, he instead started to jump from wall to wall. Izuku became a green blur as he bounced off the walls. Izuku bounced past the first 3 villains, landing devastating blows on each as he passed them. The 3 villains fell to the ground out cold. "What? Ugh," spoke one of the villains before Izuku sent a flying kick to his face, which knocked out a tooth or 2. Izuku didn't even slow down as the villains slumped to the floor. Izuku's mind was clear and focused solely on the fight. Izuku's face under his mask and hood was a picture of pure determination. Some of the villains tried to retaliate, but all they hit was air, as Izuku proved too maneuverable for the petty thugs. A few of them proved stuttier than the rest, as they were still standing when Izuku neared the exit to the alleyway. But the rabbit hero in training simply stopped and then started to bounce back down the alley, taking out the rest of the villains. The last of the villains that Izuku was dealing with got a roundhouse kick to the ribs, which knocked the villain into a brick wall. With the flank secure for now, Izuku turned around only to see his 2 comrades flying towards him. Izuku caught his 2 classmates, but was pushed back a few meters from the impact. "Man, that guy hits hard," spoke Tetsu. His steel skin cracked and fell off around his arms and chest. Tetsu made the remaining of his metal skin recede back into his body. "I thank you for the catch, Sir Midoriya," spoke Jiroda, trying to regain his breath after the villain had knocked it out of him. Izuku locked eyes with the large orc villain when he heard him growl in frustration. "Come on, ya gits give me a proper fight. The better da fight, da bigger, arter and stronger I get," bellowed out the orc-like villain. Jiroda and Tetsu both stood up, as Izuku stood analyzing his opponent that easily took up most of the alley. He's massive and clearly skilled in combat, but his movements are limited due to the tight space. Most of his body is covered in armor, so it will be difficult to hurt him. With all the wet metal, maybe, thought Izuku, glancing at one of his hands, which cracked with green lighting. "No, I don't know if it will shock the others cause they're soaked too. His head is exposed, so if we can get a good hit to his head, we may be able to knock him out. His joints are exposed. That might work," thought Izuku, rapidly coming up with a plan. "Guys, I got a plan," spoke Izuku to his friends. "All right, what do you need us to do, Prez?" asked Tetsu as he reapplied his quirk. "Jiroda, you're gonna slide under him and hit the back of his knees. That should take out his legs. I'll break his axe, which should leave him open. When that happens, Tetsu, you need to hit him in the head as hard as you can. I'll follow up if he's still awake," explained Izuku quickly. "Simple and straightforward. I like it," replied Tetsu, ready for round 2. "I shall bring the brute down," commented Jiroda with a noted. The bestial student let out a roar of challenge and charged at the villain Izuku and Tetsu following behind him. "That's the spirit," yelled out the villain excitedly as he countercharged the young heroes. The villain raised his axe above his head for an overhead swing once Jiroda was within striking distance. But that was exactly what Izuku wanted, pushing one for all to 8%. Izuku moved much faster than before, the others barely saw him move. One moment Izuku was there, the next to them. The next moment he's flying through the air while performing a dropkick. "Smash!" yelled Izuku as he made contact with the axe head, which promptly shattered under the force of his kick. The villain was stunned that his favorite weapon had been sundered. This allowed Jirota to slide under the villain's legs. With a roar and a pair of large bestial hands, Jirota lashes out at the villain's exposed joints. The villain's knees buckled and made him partly collapse. "Strong right!" yelled out Tetsutetsu as he put his entire body behind the punch. The villain's nose broke along with one of the tusks protruding from his mouth. However, despite the villain's bleeding nose, he still headbutted Tetsutetsu's face in retaliation, causing cracks to form in the metal. "Don't think you won, I'm still gonna crump ya," started the villain in slightly slurred speech. Before Izuku axe kicked the villain's head, the villain laid their face first in the wet asphalt out cold like his allies. The three students stared at the villain ready in case he got back up. After a few tense moments, Tetsutetsu spoke. "All right, we did it. That was so manly," yelled Tetsutetsu in victory, raising a fist to his friends. "I'm so glad that worked. You guys did great," spoke Izuku, reciprocating Tetsutetsu's fist bump. "It was a good plan, Sir Midoriya. This would have been much more difficult if you weren't here." "But what is our next move?" spoke Jirota as he also fist bumped Tetsutetsu. "There is a villain that is missing plus any others that are still in the zone. We should get out of the zone and move toward the plaza. With luck, Vlad Sensei might be finished with the villains there and we can team up with him. But if he's still fighting, then we can help lighten his load by picking off some of the villains," spoke Izuku as he walked the two boys through his thought process. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let go," spoke Tetsutetsu, turning his quirk off not to overexert himself. But Tetsutetsu and Jirota were both suddenly webbed to the alley wall, webbed up and trapped like bugs in a spider's web. Their mouths were also covered to prevent them from speaking. Izuku tried to move as he tried to locate the villain, but a white thread stuck to his shoulder and then another to one of his arms. Before he knew it, he was wrapped up. Several bands of thread ringed around him, with his arms pinned against his sides. More webbing wrapped around his legs from his ankles to just above his knees. He could hear his classmate let out muffled sounds of rage and concern as Izuku was lifted up into the air. Izuku tried to break free, but the thread held firm. "Sorry, I can't let you jump around, little rabbit," spoke a feminine voice with a purr. Izuku was brought face to face with the villains. She looked very young, like she was in her early 20s. Her skin was very dark, almost purple-looking, her ears were pointy, her hair was snow white and done up in a fancy ponytail. A mask fit for a masquerade rested on her face. She wore ornate red and black cloths that were equal parts sensual and protective. They also emphasized her curvy figure and her large chest. But her most distinct features were the fact that from around her hips down, she was a massive spider, her clawed fingers, her black eyes with red irises, and she had extra eyes that were solid black around her forehead. Altogether, she resembled a creature for some pre-Quirk era myth. But despite what some would call monstrous features, she was somehow still incredibly beautiful. She stood above the alley balancing effortlessly on silk thread of her own making. In one of her hands, she held an umbrella made of silk that blocked the rain from falling on them. She held Izuku up using her two front legs and brought him up to eye level. "Why, hello, young one. You may call me Lolt. I am searching for someone specific and was told he'd be in this zone. You wouldn't mind helping me, would you, little hero?" spoke Lolt in a sweet, polite tone, which held dangerous undertones. Izuku knew that if he gave the wrong answer, he would no doubt suffer pain at best. So Izuku nodded. Keeping her talking gave him more time to figure out a way to escape, preferably without shattering his bones. "Excellent. Now, why don't I remove these to start?" spoke Lolt cheerily as she extended clawed fingers, and with delicate movements only obtained by a lifetime of using the clawed fingers did she remove his hood and dropped his gas mask, which broke when it hit the ground. All 8 of her eyes widened and her mouth morphed into a wide grin that revealed sharp fangs. My, seems I got lucky. Not only did I find you so quickly, but you're so much cuter than he led me to believe," spoke Lolt in joy as she caressed one of his cheeks. The implications of her words did not go unnoticed by Izuku. "Who told you about me?" stuttered out Izuku as he slipped back into his normal nervousness as the villainesses brought him closer. Oh, just some pervert. He wouldn't stop staring at my breasts the whole time he talked to us. I'd normally punish that sort of thing since he's not my type, and that's not even counting his weird looks. But enough about him. What's the name of my little rabbit? Responded Lolt, shifting into a husky sexy tone near the end as she gently placed her claws near his neck. Izuku stayed silent, not wanting to give out his to the villainesses. Awa, a little shy, are we? That's fine, just means we need to get to know each other. Spoke Lolt with a playful and sensual tone reminiscent of how Midnight talks. Her tone plus the fact that she was feeling up Izuku's arms, chest, and abs through his costume made the green-haired boy blush heavily. She smiled wickedly at his reaction, and she seemed very pleased at what she was feeling. Before she suddenly took hold of Izuku's crotch, Izuku's eyes widened and his blush went atomic at her touch. Oh my, you're certainly blessed, aren't you? I can't wait to teach you just how to use it. How about we go home and I can give you your first lesson? Commented Lolt through half-lidded eyes as she licked her lips with her tongue, which once again revealing her long needle-like fangs. Hey hag, you let that cinnamon roll go, yelled out Kami as she landed feet first onto the spider part of the villainess. The villainess dropped her makeshift umbrella at the landing as the thread she stood on bounced at the added weight. Kami gave her no chance to react as she slammed her batons into the spider legs, holding Izuku with as much force as she could muster. With a cry of pain, Lolt dropped Izuku. Kami jumped off the villainess and dove for Izuku, but not before leaving a surprise for the women. I got you, fam, spoke Kami as she grabbed a hold of Izuku with one arm. With her other arm, she pulled out a gun like a gadget from her belt that shot out a grapple line, allowing her to safely lower them to the ground. You little bitch, how dare you? Spoke Lolt in rage. Kami glared up at Lolt before she pulled out a little device with several buttons. With a smirk, she pressed one of the buttons. The mine she left on the villainess's back went off, releasing a steady stream of Kami's glamour gas. Lolt started freaking out at the hallucinations she was now experiencing. Once Kami was sure that the villain was under the full effects of her quirk, did she turn back to Izuku. With a gesture of her hands, sharp metal cat claws deployed from the ends of her costume's gloves. The wind and rain will lower the time, but that should keep her busy for a bit. Have to thank you for the belt because there are so many useful gizmos in here. Now hold still, spoke Kami. Izuku was surprised at how her tone was still so laid back despite the situation. It was kind of comforting in a weird way. With a few well-made swipes from Kami and Izuku was free. You all right, Izuku? That hag didn't hurt you? Asked Kami as she helped him stand. I'm fine thanks to you, Kami. I wasn't sure how I was going to escape her without breaking something. And we should free the others, responded Izuku nervously and with a large blush as he recalled the villainess's actions. Izuku put his hood back up to try and hide his face. But Kami didn't miss how he dodged the question or the look on his face. She sent another glare at the spider bitch as they rushed over to Tetsu and Jirota. The two captured boys muffled loudly in a warning. Reacting quickly, Izuku activated full cowl, scooped up Kami, and dodged several lines of thread and several black tentacles. When he stopped and let Kami down, they noticed Lolt on one side and the lanky villain in the suit. Gideon, you sick fuck, what are you doing here? Spoke Lolt, literally spitting venom out alongside her words as all her eyes glared at the lanky man. I am here on a job same as you. Plus, I seem to have found a stray cat that I wish to keep. So I propose some cooperation, so I can get my cat and you can get your little rabbit. Spoke Gideon calmly, but clearly with a mocking tone at the end. Izuku faces Gideon immediately knowing that the villain was targeting Kami. He glared in anger at the villain as green lighting seemed to leak from his eyes, causing them to glow. HMPH, fine, but I'm leaving as soon as I have him. I need a good bath to feel clean after dealing with you. Spoke Lolt in agreement, but still throwing a barb at her fellow villain. Kami placed her back against Izuku as she turned to face Lolt. covertly slipping several of her glamour gas mines into Izuku's hands while the villains talked. The two villains both attacked at once, tentacles and webbing lancing out to bind the heroes and seal their fates. Kami and Izuku both dodged the initial attack. Izuku started bouncing around the villain as he avoided the villain's attacks. Izuku was discreetly leaving gas mines as he bounced around. "Hold still, you insolent child," growled Gideon in frustration as Izuku bounced around him, shooting bursts of air at him. Kami blew out some of her glamour gas, making it seem that there were 3 of her, with one using the grapple guns to ascend above the villain and the other 2 charging at her with weapons drawn. The real Kami, who used her quirk to make herself invisible and mute her movements, snuck around, placing more mines around Lolt. "Your little games don't amuse me, cat. He will be mine, and you'll wish you'd be dead," yelled Lolt, who leaped forward in a jump that closed the distance to the 2 grounded charging Kami. Lolt brought 2 of her legs down, stabbing through the legs of the Kami illusions. But both had no resistance, proving that both were just hallucinations. "Ha! You fell for it, hag," yelled the airborne Kami, swinging down for a kick. "Have I?" countered Lolt as she shot out more webbing, hitting the airborne Kami dead center, only for her tread to pass right through the illusion.
Yep, you both have, yelled out the real Kami, revealing herself as she pushed the button on her detonator. The mines she and Izuku planted around their foes exploded into clouds of multicolored gas. The villains started attacking thin air and each other. With her foes distracted, Kami freed Jiroda and Tetsu. From there, it was easy for the 3 boys to subdue one villain, while Kami kept the other distracted with her illusions.
With the last of the villains dealt with, the 4 heroes in training quickly started to move toward the edge of the zone so they could find the exit.
"So, Izuku, what's with the light show?" asked Kami, confused as to why he wasn't breaking himself and why he had lighting arcing over him.
"Oh yeah, I guess I should explain that. So Vlad Sensei has been doing extra training with me after school. He figured out a way to use my quirk without it hurting me. I call it full cowl. I can only really use 5% safely for right now. I can push myself to 8%, but I risk fracturing my bones when I do. I was planning on showing it to the class today," spoke Izuku, rushing through his words due to nervousness as he scratched the back of his head. "That's lit. Now you don't have to wreck your bod every time you use your quirk." "Naya," commented Kami, happy for his improvement. The cat-themed heroine gave him a quick side hug. "That's so manly. We got a spare after," spoke up Tetsu excitedly. "I recommend sparing after we survive this situation. Also, I believe that is the exit," spoke Jiroda, pointing at a pair of metal doors. "Finally, I'm tots ready to get out of this rain," spoke Kami as she picked up the pace. "Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout out to Alpha of Rapture for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on Fanfiction. Met for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to Deku What If 2.0 if for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.